This is Culture Crime Fighters. We are a Culture Crimes Task Force so powerful, so far-reaching, not even the most dastardly of villains can escape. Our goal is to identify and defeat all culture criminals wherever they lurk and destroy them. For too long have these cretins carried out their nefarious deeds, and we will sit for it no longer. Beware, you may commit your culture crimes, but if you do, justice will be served at the hands of the Culture Crime Fighters.
What are you?
I'm Vigilante Williamson.
You went full.
SJW.
Never go full.
SJW.
You don't buy that? Yeah.
President of Lucasfilm, Kathleen Kennedy.
You guys are nuts. That's one of my pet peeves, and here you come along with a third pronunciation. Like, what are you doing? Actually, it's pronounced
Stupid bitch.
If you could just be like 25% less brave, that would be great. People were like, there's no way he fucked her. This pig, he didn't fuck this pig.
I think he probably did. I think he didn't give a fuck. Allegedly.
That's just your opinion. It's in England, they say
Audible cunt.
And in America, we say Amber Heard. And that's where the confusion is.
See, I was going with the British way.
Turns out it's a little more nuanced than that.
And I mean, hey, we're in 2021. Any moderately attractive girl can do squats for a few months and put a camera up her ass and become go viral. So
I don't know. I mean, I'll keep my mind open. I spent all day yesterday on that video. I edited, I cut, I put sound effects and visuals. I'm tap dancing, I'm spinning plates. Although for the life of me, I can't grow it. It's got like 45 fucking views.
You know what I think it is now? Tease the algorithmic guys. Brightest Day is in the chat. His channel is growing because of those shorts. Yeah, that's how it goes.
That's how it is.
Man, this has been a fun ride. I thank everybody for being here the whole time. I mean, there's regulars, obviously. Snow the Poopist, the Islington Girl, Man of War 665, Neighbor of the Beast. Just another red shirt. Not just another red shirt. He's the red shirt. The crew. I love you all, man.
You guys are the shit. Love you all. Man of War 665, Lord Thoth, Just Another Red Shirt, Darius Munchausen, 24/7 Fusion Media, Ascension Dildo, Mark D with a C, Snorter Poopus, Android Scanner, The Islington Girl, New Bomb Turk. Everybody, you guys are great. We'll see you all next time. Have a great night.
Peace.
Yeah, peace. I love peace.
All right. Vigilante Williamson here on the 18th in a special episode of the Culture Crime Fighters with my usual partner in Culture Crime Fighting, Matt from Foulball Productions, but none other than the man, the myth, the legend, Robert Meyer Burnett himself. Howdy.
Well, thank you, gentlemen, for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, sirs.
Oh, glad to have you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you.
It was great meeting you, Vigilante, even though I called you, what I call you? Valkyrie?
Valiant Renegade. And
Valiant Renegade.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody does it. That's the joke. Gary has done it. Comics Division has done it. A few other people have done it. It's
you know what's funny? I read a lot, and when you're reading a book and you look at a character name and you kind of file it away because every time the character you just kind of know what it is.
Hermione.
So, and I just I see the V, and that was the first thing I was thinking of. It's just in my mind. So I apologize for being remiss.
It's the thing. I think it's just the V and R and W. It's a similar thing. So you just file it away in the same memory bank, and it happens.
It's a pneumatic memory device, and it didn't work this time. It didn't work.
I mean,
it's like the opposite of Johnny. Was it Johnny Mnemonic?
Johnny Mnemonic, yeah.
Yeah. That's a rough movie. I was rewatching that. It was like, oof.
That was actually directed by an artist named Robert Longo, who came to prominence. He directed New Order's True Faith video, and he did these huge illustrations of people falling. This is way pre 9/11, like falling through the air, and it was his big directorial debut, and
it felt like
it's not good.
It's not. It's really like it's egregious, but it's kind of interesting. It's like one of those movies where you're like, how did this happen? It's like a case study.
Yeah, well, and you're a big. It's like, well, he's a big famous artist. He's the cause celeb of New York now. Why he's directing music videos? Let's let him direct a feature.
Yeah.
And like, I understand that thought process, but then sometimes it doesn't work out.
There's some remarkable movies that come along every once in a while that are very like Room-esque, where they're done with like a lot of love and passion, and they're these sort of like tragic like executions where it's like they really meant well, but you tell they're inept. But it's fascinating because they're not hacks in the traditional sense. Like they're really trying, they just have no instincts.
Well, I think what's interesting about movie making is the one thing in the world that most people think they can do. Like I know I couldn't be a brain surgeon.
That's true.
But there's everybody, because we all watch movies, so we think, well, I could have done better. Right. I can't tell you how many like living in LA for the last 30 years, people are like, I've got a great idea for a sitcom. Me and my friends, it's so funny. I can't tell you how many times I've heard that.
Everyone has an idea. I used to live in LA for 10 years, Robert, and
then
everywhere you go, and I'm one of them too. I had the same kind of arrogance about it. I'm like, yeah, I know I would have handled this better, or my script is better, or whatever.
But what's really interesting, like when I would get reels in, when I'd look at like cinematographer reels, they've got all of this beautiful imagery on them, and there's a lot of people that. But what I want to see is, show me how you would shoot a conversation between two people sitting at a table talking. Can you make that more interesting than traditional coverage? And, like, does it work? And you'd be surprised that there's a lot of people that they think they understand the mechanics of, say, shot progression, setting a scene, and they really don't.
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. Well,
no, I made a few shorts and I learned how much I didn't know.
Yeah.
Like I thought I did. And I was like, oh no, like even just the basic setups, it's a lot goes into it.
I'm a big believer. I think everybody who's a film fan should, and now you've got the technology, you're carrying it around in your pocket. I think everybody should try and make a movie, whether it's a short, because you will learn so much, not just about movie making, but just about thinking clearly. Like, okay, you're going to tell a story, like shoot a scene where it's a breakup. Like David Fincher did it at the beginning of The Social Network. It's like a 9-minute scene, and it takes you on a total journey. And it's two people sitting at a table, and it's great. Yeah. And I look at that and I'm like, can you do that? And I know I'm comparing people to David Fincher, which is way unfair. Right. But the idea is still the same. Can you sit down and shoot a conversation between two people and make that so an audience understands what's happening in the scene? Via cutting, via performance, via shot choice, and people, you learn an immense amount doing that. And we're all on the internet ranting and railing at people all the time. Like, why does this suck? Like yesterday, I'm like, this really, the new Star Trek Picard trailer comes out, and gosh, we're gonna get Q, the Borg, and alternate timelines. Is that Star Trek? Is that everything it's become now? It's all time. It's all these tropes that worked. They worked well because they were special. Right. You'd watch a couple of seasons of Star Trek, and then you might get a Q story. Right. One Q story after 52 episodes. So a Q story was something that was unique and special. And now it's like time travel. That's easy. Let's do that. Borg. Sure. Why not? Everyone loves the Borg. It's almost as if the Star Trek producers only have watched the same 10 episodes and they haven't watched any other Star Trek.
A, that wouldn't shock me. And
no, me neither.
I think it's worse than that. This kind of ties into a bunch of stuff I kind of want to talk about. It's just, what are these people thinking? How does this happen? And I think they're just Googling. I think they just Google.
Oh, I agree.
And they just say, oh, Borg is top. We'll use Borg. They like Borg. We'll put Borg in. Well,
that's what they're doing. But it's like, it's always, context is king. There was even an episode of Star Trek Discovery that alluded to that. But the idea that they don't, in order to have the Borg, I mean, the Borg showed up halfway through the second season of Next Generation, and it was one half of an episode, and it was really intriguing. And then a season and a half later, at the end of season 3, they brought the Borg back for the best of both worlds. So after 3 seasons of Star Trek, which was, so it's 26, 22, and 26 episodes. What is that? Like more than 70 episodes of Star Trek. We got 2 Borg episodes. And that's why they were special. because you had 70 other episodes of Star Trek to surround those episodes, to build up the characters and build up the storylines and make the Borg special. And then in the Borg episode, The Best of Both Worlds, the secondary story was about Riker's power struggle with Shelby to become he was supposed to take his own command, and Shelby wanted to be second in command of the Enterprise. So you had a really interesting, compelling human story along with the apocalyptic Borg storyline, which makes it, that's what compelling Star Trek is. And now we've got the Borg. Oh, we got to go back into the past, into Los Angeles of the past, and which they did in Voyager already. So there's nothing that we're getting in modern Star Trek that's really new, and it's unfortunate.
It was something we were talking about yesterday about the new Indiana Jones movie. Is what I think that is happening is that, you know, these executives, they have the numbers, they have the streaming numbers of what people are watching. And I think they go back and they saw during the coup, you know, wow, people were rewatching Next Generation. They were rewatching Indiana Jones. They were rewatching, you know, Aliens, Predator, all these movies. They're like, okay, so there's still juice in this berry of these franchises. As like when the lesson should be, no, we are so not interested in what your modern entertainment is that we went back to the stuff that we used to enjoy. It's not that we need a superficial facsimile of this thing today. Just because I like the Borg in the 90s doesn't mean I need the Borg in 2021. It's just that was good entertainment. Yours is bad entertainment. That's the lesson.
I don't disagree with you. What I want to know is, you know, nobody ever got rich following trends. You know, you get rich setting trends, and all of these IPs that they keep going back to, where are the new IPs? Like, yes. where are the IPs of today that in 25 years audiences will then look back fondly? It's so weird because what's happened is it's become so expensive to make things. You know, you're looking at, you make a quote unquote tentpole property and you're spending $150 million. And when you're spending that much money, by definition, you have to be as risk averse as possible. You have to make sure that your $150 million is protected. Now, I understand that economic reality. I totally do. So it's like, well, we're not gonna spend $150 million on an untried property. Mm-hmm. But that's when your visionary filmmakers come in. You know, your visionary filmmakers are supposed to, like, you know, a lot of people didn't want to make Back to the Future back in when it came out in 85. And it took a long time for Bob Gale and Robert Zemeckis to get that movie made.
Well, you know, think about the difference between Alien and Aliens. It was like 7 years or 6 years or something like that. Like, that's how risk averse they were with those like big, like they didn't just immediately, okay, Alien was a hit, let's make another one. It took like 7 years, and Cameron really had to convince them that it was going to be was worthwhile.
Well, and more than that, Cameron was passionate about making a sequel to Aliens. He loved Alien. He had an idea. He had the juice after Terminator, which was his own. He wrote and directed that film. It was his own original. Well, original.
I was just going to say original.
But his idea, it was a pastiche. And then, you know, he comes up with an idea. So you have a passionate filmmaker that is hell bent on making a sequel to Aliens. Nowadays, that doesn't happen. The studios decide, okay, we're going to resurrect this franchise. And they think, who can we find to do it? And then they go after these directors, and who doesn't want a job?
Right, of course.
But then what you get is I mean, look, I do think I've met Tim Miller. I think Tim Miller is a world-class filmmaker. Like, he made Deadpool, the first Deadpool, for a relatively paltry $65 million. But, you know, he loves the Terminator franchise. But when they do the Terminator franchise, where do you go with that? They just keep recycling the same idea. And I think the thing about the Terminator, Terminator franchise, after watching the Sarah Connor Chronicles, which is actually quite good, where do you go from there? You just keep telling the same story. It's the Skynet, it's the evil AI that's going to, and there's really, I think, unfortunately, as well made or something as you can look, the technology is there. So Terminator Dark Fate's fine. But, you know, you go in there and you look at that and you're like, did this movie really need to be made? And it's because Skydance spent a lot of money on the franchise. They were going to make three movies.
The Skynet's conspiracy from the future to ruin the movie franchise, to throw people off the scent.
I mean, they want to make money, but it's like they didn't buy the Terminator franchise because somebody had a great idea about how you could extend the franchise. They're like, ooh, Terminator's available. Let's get the franchise. And then what I also find frustrating is if you own something like the Terminator franchise, there are many bits of previously existing material, like, oh, I don't know, the Dark Horse comic book that has a lot of great stories that were told by really passionate people who loved the franchise and had ideas for the franchise, which is why Dark Horse allowed them to write comics in the first place, because they don't want to publish shitty Terminator comics. Right. Like the Aliens versus Predator comic that Dark Horse published, the first one, is actually quite good. Why not go look at that and go, let's adapt that?
Because they don't have any passion.
There's no existing IP.
Well, honestly, I just have a theory about executives. No, but I just have a theory about executives that they have no passion for any of this, but a tremendous amount of hubris about what should get made. Because all I see is just pale imitations of things that came before, but their fingerprints all over it.
Right. And again, but they're put in these positions. They're Ivy League educated business people that on paper are really good hires. You look at these people like, oh my God, he graduated from Harvard or Yale or Princeton. We're going to hire this guy, because from a corporate standpoint, you want somebody to work at that level that has had that. And that makes perfect sense to me. But then the problem is, now you're working at a company that's making DC Universe movies. Do you know anything about the DC Universe? Do you know why people love Superman and Batman?
Do you care to know why? Like, that's a big question too.
Even if you didn't know before, are you willing to do research? I hate to interrupt the conversation, but I have to, because the benefactor of this channel, Ogre Squasher 101, has tipped in a spectacular $101.
Oh my God,
51 cents, which is insane, because he shows up like a he's the vigilante of the Vigilante Williamson channel. Since your dildo believes he's laundering his money, I don't care. I don't ask any questions. Thank you, Ogre Squasher. I did not miss your super chat.
That is a very generous. Anybody who supports a YouTube channel in that way deserves to be thanked and lauded. I mean, can you imagine? Like, we now live in a world where our audience can appreciate us directly like that, and to have that kind of patronage, it's pretty special. So kudos to you, gentlemen, for eliciting that kind of.
We're both pretty small channels and pretty new at this. Like, on my 1 year anniversary is like in a week. Like, we basically are brand new, and the fact that we have like fans that come along and that are this generous and this passionate and this consistent is amazing.
Well, that speaks well to you guys. So kudos to you.
Thanks. Thanks. I mean, they're awesome. Just an awesome group of people.
That's why I'm crediting him as my executive producer. He literally is. On videos I'm starting to do more videos. He's the executive producer. Thank you, Ogre Squasher. You literally keep a channel that's not monetized. Your contribution is beyond belief. So thank you so much.
And it's hard now to get monetized. It's what, 3,000 or 4,000 viewing hours plus 1,000 subscribers.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
That's tough.
Takes time.
Takes a while.
Yeah. I was going back to your Ivy League comment. That's an interesting angle that actually a lot of people don't talk about, but it's very much there, because I was an actor for a very long time, like 15 years. And my buddy that I went to acting school with, I had like, not Yale on my resume, but I had like these good like art conservatories like for acting that, they teach you the craft. And I went to school with a buddy who had basically just started, but he was a Cornell graduate, and immediately like he just was so at the front of the line for, getting meetings with these agents, because these agents, they're all kind of like jocks, they're all kind of like they went to, college for, and they respect that, pedigree. They're like, oh, okay, you're a real person. You're not one of these wannabe artists. And like, it just opens the door for him. And it's like, meanwhile, he doesn't have that much experience. And, it's like, there's a lot of other people that are like really into this or artistic, but they're not interested. They're like, well, you can go to Cornell. He did.
Until you've done something that makes them interested, like you're suddenly in a hit show, or you get some juice on you. And there's also, for people that get work in the industry, there's also a bit of luck, obviously, and there's also a cool factor. Like if you find yourself in a movie like on the independent film circuit that's deemed cool, or it's on the festival circuit, whatever that movie is, then suddenly you get an extra added jolt of heat for your career, and then people will get to see you and meet you, because they think that just because your proximity to something cool, that means you could rub off on another project, and that project would be cool too. And when I say cool, I mean cool within the industry. Something that's getting a lot of buzz or makes a lot of money, however that's defined, that you have that that cool factor, and you do need that to get work because, as everyone says, you're always judged by your last project.
Mm-hmm. And there's definitely like I knew this kid, dude, I went to acting school with, and he's a pretty successful actor now. And like as soon as I met him, I was like, oh, this kid's gonna make it. Like, and it was just that it wasn't even that he was a terrific actor. It was just that he had all the right collection of characteristics. Like he had like a spark about him, but he was humble enough, but he was like comfortable with himself. And he also said like the right things, but he meant it. So I was like, oh, this kid, he's right. Like I knew within a year he'd be on good TV shows, and he was. And he was on that like Stargirl show, like as like one of the superheroes. So it's
wow.
Yeah. So like he like hit, and he's only like, I don't know, 22, 23, something like that. But I was like, I could just see it happening. Like, oh, okay.
Like you said, you can tell.
Yeah.
Especially with actors. Like I've met a lot of actors in the business over the last time I've lived here, and you can tell. I mean, those people might secretly be assholes and their career will implode later, but you can see that, okay, they really do have that quality about them.
They do. And also like it was more like I knew the industry would love him. They would eat him up. Like I know what they value and what they are. And also like, you know, he deserves to be there. He wasn't a bad actor, but it was just those collection of like, you know, the it factor that they say is a collection of characteristics. I was like, he's perfect. He's exactly what they're looking for. And of course, right in.
Yeah, you know, I was kind of a good friend of mine was friends with Vince Vaughn and Jon Favreau in the mid 90s before they had done Swingers.
Right on.
And I was hanging out with those guys. And, you know, to meet Vince Vaughn was one of the most, he's probably still is. I just haven't seen him in a long time. He was one of the most charismatic, funniest people I'd ever met.
Really?
And like you couldn't be in a room with him without him making you smile. And I mean, he would gently rib you about something. He could wantonly make fun of you, but in a funny, more of a loving way. And he had incredible stories. And when I saw the movie Swingers for the first time, it's kind of people don't talk about it anymore, but Favreau wrote it and Doug Liman directed it. And it starred Favreau and Vince Vaughn. And you watch that movie and Vince Vaughn like is so charismatic. He leaps off the screen, and you know, they made that movie for $350,000 and they were just basically being themselves, going to places in LA that they hung out in anyway.
Yeah.
And of course they sold that movie for $5 million to Miramax, and off went their careers.
Yeah. But it's about a subject matter that generally is about the least interesting thing is actors living in LA. It's right. Like, of all the topics, it's so boring. And it's especially amongst people who live in LA and are actors, everyone's just like, oh, another one of these fucking movies. And it's awesome. Like it's fun, it's funny, it's memorable, it's quotable, it's very relatable. And it has like a cameo from Heather Graham at the end.
Yeah, Heather Graham. You know? That's who Jon Favreau meets. And what I love about it is Favreau's character is such a sad sack. He's pining over his old girlfriend. Like we all recognize. And there's things about that movie, like, you know, you go to the public golf course in the middle of the day because nobody's there and you're not working anyway, so you can just sit there and have conversations about your love life. I mean, it really captured a moment in time that really was so LA.
I love when he's in the diner in Vegas and he's trying to make those jokes. He's like, I'll have the eggs in the Age of Enlightenment, please. And she just, he thinks like, oh, it was too highbrow for reference. And she just like comes back in a second Voltaire. Like she totally got it. It was just a terrible joke.
It was so good. So good. Yeah. And it's that movie's actually very, very smart. And I think those guys were, because they were really smart just in general. I mean, and you see it. And of course, look at their careers now. I mean, Favreau founded the MCU directing Iron Man, and Vince Vaughn has had a great, although he's still a great actor. Like you watch something like Brawl and Cell Block 99 and he's fucking great. Or Dragged Across Concrete with Mel Gibson. Watch Dragged Across Concrete. Oh my God.
Really?
And yeah, and I thought Vince Vaughn would wind up, I kind of like the fact that he's doing these all kinds of different things. Like he was in Freaky, you know, and he's just done some really eclectic stuff, which I think is kind of, you know, I think he stopped trying to be this leading man going after these giant roles, but instead he's sort of settled into this. He has a really interesting career now, which I think is great.
Well, part of the thing that's happened is comedies aren't really a thing anymore. They're not as big of a, I mean, not that he was limited to that, but that was really where, you know, he was the biggest star, is doing comedies, and that's not a thing. And actually, I kind of want to piggyback off your point to something that you said in a recent video. We were talking about love, right? That there has to be love in these franchises. I think that's what we're talking about. We're talking about the clash between corporations and corporate thinking with artists and creative thinking, and that
100%.
clash creates this where you can make a Swingers in the 90s and have some basically an independent film that's sold to Miramax to become successful, and you can never have something like that now. You can't have it because everything has to be corporate approved, and rather the idea is wokeness or the idea is blow stuff up a bunch of times, it doesn't matter. It's whatever becomes the trend. We're just going to beat it into the ground, wait 10 years until after the trend has already fallen off, and then realize, oh, nobody cares about this trend anymore that we've beaten to the ground, and there's no original stories.
I completely agree with you. You know, and I think there are places in Hollywood, like I look over at Blumhouse, Jason Blum's company, because if you're at Blumhouse, like Lee Wanell, for instance, they had Invisible Man, you know, they're going to try and they couldn't make the Monsterverse work on the corporate level. So now they've got the Monsterverse at Blumhouse's level, and you got a guy like Lee Wanell coming in and writing and directing the Invisible Man for $8 million. You know, that was a labor of love on his part. He wanted to establish himself further as a writer, director, as an auteur. And he goes and he makes this. Blumhouse gives you enough money, but not too much. And if it turns out well, then they'll release it theatrically. And so Invisible Man comes out, $8 million spend, and they make $100 million on that movie. That's a huge monster hit. And for a company like Blumhouse, which is small, what you're doing is you're finding great creators and you're allowing them to work within a certain paradigm, and they succeed. And that's how it's supposed to be. But the problem is, for a bigger corporation, they're like, ugh, well, you only made $100 million. We need you to make $1 billion. And so to make $1 billion, the correlation is, well, we have to spend $150 million. I mean, how many? That's how many different? That's almost 20 Invisible Mans.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, if you make 20 Invisible Mans and they each make on an $8 million spend and they each make $100 million, which they won't do, but let's say that they did for the sake of argument, that's still great because you've launched a bunch more talent that is loyal to you, that will bring their projects to you first. And with all the content that we need on streaming services, you're better off. If you're trying to roll the dice, like I do not understand why studios can't go back to a model and be making theatrical tentpoles for $50 million.
Oh my God. I say this all the time.
I'm sorry, it just has to be because of the parent companies aren't interested in anything other than those explosive profits, because there doesn't make any sense. Like you just described that profit. What other business can you invest $8 million, get $100 million back inside of 2 years, and that's not good enough for you? Like I just can't understand that.
Well, I'll tell you who it's good enough for: Jason Blum and Blumhouse.
Sure,
because
sure, he loves it.
You know, they've made that model work, and whether they're doing the Insidious franchise or whatever they're involved in, they've kept their costs down, and in a way, they're kind of the successors to companies like Roger Corman's New World Pictures or New Concord or whatever, and what Charlie Band was doing with Full Moon. In a way, that it's a low. I mean, they're a little more limited in terms of the kind of movies they're making, but you know, I look at something like M. Night Shyamalan was kind of in the doghouse for making movies like Lady in the Water and The Happening, but he comes back to Blumhouse and he goes and he makes The Visit for $5 million. And he was smart. He's like, I'm in director jail. Nobody wants to work with me. I was kind of an arrogant prick, and then I fell from grace because my movie sucked. He comes back and he makes The Visit for Blumhouse for $5 million. It makes good money, you know. And then he goes and he does Split, which is a backdoor sequel to Unbreakable, which nobody really knew until the end. And then it's like that made good money. And then he comes back and he makes Glass. And now he's doing something. He's adapting a French graphic novel, his new movie Old, which looks pretty good. I watched the trailer. I'm like, well, that's something I haven't seen before. You know, you go to the beach and suddenly you're aging 2 years every single hour that passes. Well, that's kind of messed up, but I want to see that movie. And that's kind of a crazy thing for him to do.
I have a director friend that I wish you could talk to. This guy Jared, who like, he like really respects Shyamalan's. Like he's like, his shot composition is really like top tier. And I was like, wow, are we really complimenting Shyamalan right now? He's like, he had all these great arguments as to why. I was like, oh, like that's the difference between someone who's like a professional who does this and can really see the difference between like, you know, the average director and like someone who does know what he's doing. Maybe his story and scripts are a little inconsistent. Maybe he's a little indulgent on some of the run times, but it's, you know, no, he actually does know what he's doing as far as making a good movie.
I agree. And look, I watch things like I really like the script for The Happening. And when I saw the finished film, I'm like, there's not one thing in this movie that works. Like nothing. Like nothing works. Like I'm watching this and I really love the script. Those kind of stories are right up my alley. And I was actually perplexed when I saw the film because I'm like, how does nothing about this movie work? And it's always
amazing
because I think M. Night Shyamalan's first three movies. Well, actually, I didn't see his very first movie, but The Sixth Sense, Unbreakable, and Signs are all very respectable works.
Those were his first three big movies. Sheesh.
Yeah, and you think, man, those films are all world class, A-list before when Bruce Willis was still A-list and cared. You know, it was those were good, solid, really interesting, writer-director-driven visions.
They're all unique ideas. Let's give them that. I mean, you know, even if the execution is like not up to your standard or whatever, I mean, each one of those has got its own vision and its own idea behind it, and they're distinct and unique. And I mean, God, that's like unprecedented for now. You know,
we don't get that now, unfortunately.
No, and I find, you know, because it's hard for people to take a risk. And I honestly think that nowadays, like I read a great deal. I mean, I don't just watch TV and movies. I read a lot because when I was growing up, movies and TV shows and books to me were equal. Like I was huge I still am. I've been reading Stephen King for fucking 40 years and longer. And I would eagerly, like the first day a Stephen King book would come out, I would take the bus because I was too young. I'd drive take the bus to the bookstore and buy a Stephen King book and bring it home that day and devour it. I mean, it was hugely important to me. And nowadays, you know, I go into these meetings and people just, they don't know anything. They don't know. You talk about Stephen King and they haven't read the books and there's no sense of history.
Dude, people's fucking lack of history when it comes to even just filmmaking, like books.
Oh my God.
Like how the amount of actors I know who've never seen The Godfather. I'm like, how on earth have you not seen?
Incredible.
It blows my mind how poorly researched a lot of these people are. And like in they're so boring. In LA, all they ever fucking talk about things like Friends. And it's like, all right, fine. It was a good show, The Office, but it's like they like three things. They don't have like this deep passion or knowledge of like the history. And it's like, I mean, not everyone has to be like that, but it's just like you didn't even try to see.
At least research.
At least watch it one time.
Well,
have a little respect. Also,
you know, the history of television, like you go back and even back into the 50s when you think about shows like The Honeymooners and the sitcoms like Carol O'Connor and All in the Family playing Archie Bunker, and then moving all the way up through like a lot of I call them the real actors, the actors that are all working, they have a working knowledge of the history of cinema and television. Because they have performances that they admire from 50 or 60 or 70 years ago, you know, and they can wax rhapsodic about all of these things. And to me, the people that can only talk about Friends is they wanted to be on that show. Like they didn't necessarily want to be an actor or love the craft of acting. They wanted to be Jennifer fucking Aniston. And I understand that. I can respect that. But if you're trying to pretend that you want to be an actor's a life, man. It's a lifetime avocation. You don't just dabble and go and be, I'm going to try this for, I don't know, 6 months. If I can't be a star in 6 months, I mean, I heard once, I mean, people have said it, and it's true. It takes 10 years to become an overnight success in LA.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's true of almost any profession. But everybody focuses on the one person that, oh my God, they just exploded on the pop culture landscape. I want to be like that person.
Dude, they sell that narrative, and I think it's because it serves their interest, because I think it just keeps them packed with like, you know, lots of wannabes that they can exploit, because it's like every time Hollywood depicts someone like making it, it's always this, first of all, someone always does it for them, like selects them, like magically anoints them like into the business, which is just not how it goes. And then it's also like these overnight, like you've got the thing, and it's like this magic lightning bolt. And it's like even the people who do, like they still have to put in like so much work and so much effort, and you have to be your best ambassador. There's so much to it. But also, I want to push back a little bit on what you're saying, because it's like I used to feel that used to be my philosophy. It was like the real actors, they'll rise to the top. now, man, this industry, I mean, I was only been in the time that I was in it, but it was like this culture of conformity that they've adopted. Maybe it's always been like this, but it's
I agree with you. I want to make it clear. I don't think the real actors necessarily rise to the top. I think the people that I've met that are already successful, that have had longevity in their careers, those are people that are doing theater, they do TV, they do movies. Those are people that the ones that have staying power, the ones that have already 20 or 30-year careers, and because they watch even the biggest celebrities you can imagine, if you start asking them or meeting them about, because I've done a lot of documentary work and like for movies and television shows, and when I start talking to specifically actors that have been around for a long time, they can cite these really interesting, sometimes very obscure performances from various actors that, like, have you ever seen this performance? And you can see the love in their eyes for these classic performances. And I think that's what it's like people that, they want to get into music, people that are really passionate, they can give you a dissertation on their favorite record. Yeah. And they know these things. And I think a lot of the time now, especially now more than ever, we have a society where you can be a famous person on Instagram, have millions of followers, and people, why work? I don't want to be an actor. I can just be famous on Instagram. We do have a society where you can do that now. And you can come on YouTube and start your own YouTube show and build an audience. I mean, what's really interesting is I don't feel bad, but I made a tweet. People are always asking me about, like, how come you're friends with people in the fandom menace? And I'm like, because I like them, and people are like, your whole show is based on inclusion and being friends with people. I'm like, yeah, but I am not my brother's keeper. If I like somebody, they can have different points of view. They can have diametrically politically opposed points of view, but that doesn't mean I can't still like them. And a lot of people find that strange. And I was like, look, if
How did that become strange? Wasn't that normal?
Dude, I don't know. And I made the crack. I said, if you put my 3 favorite Fandom Menace channels together, they have more viewers than Alex Kurtzman's Clarice TV series. and I'm like, that's the world we live in. So, we live in a world where people are busting their ass, and it's just a different form of entertainment. YouTube is still something that people look down on. That's going to change. It's changing now. A guy like Joe Rogan, he's somebody that's commanding money and attention. And all he's doing is doing long form interview shows that they cannot do on network TV. He
would never do, by the way. Would never do.
I mean, he takes deep dives sometimes that last 3.5 hours with somebody where you can really get into the nitty gritty.
But he also talks about stuff you're not supposed to talk about. Like he'll challenge coup restrictions. He'll talk about some of these political movements, like he'll scrutinize them. He's not like sounding off, he'll talk about that. But it's frustrating that this fandom menace gets this characterization of being exclusive. It's like, it's absolutely not. Like it's a passionate group of people. I'm sure there's dickheads on the fringes. Of course there always are, but I think maybe what intimidates people is that it's uncompromising, but that's because the passion is so complete. Runs so deep. And I imagine that that's what you gravitate towards, or that's what appeals to you about, people in the fandom. And it's even if you don't share their conclusions or share their worldview, it's like you identify with someone who cares that much about something.
100%. And not only that, like I started watching Midnight's Edge because I liked their videos. If I disagreed with something, that's fine. But I appreciated the fact that they were actually spending a lot of editorial time putting these things together. And I really enjoyed their videos. Even when there were things that they were reporting on that I didn't think were true or disagreed with, I still appreciated the take. And listening to them and having gotten to know them and they've kind of taken me under their wing. I've met at like Andre and Tom and Rob and all those people. I really like them. Like I like hanging out with them because we're passionate fans. And I think what's really interesting is we live in a time now where our favorite franchises, pick your franchise. Your favorite franchise was derived from usually either one person or a couple of people. And it became popular. And because of that popularity, it was then acquired by these entities that wanted to exploit what the individual creators originally made popular. And by definition, because you're no longer getting an individual point of view, you're just getting what the corporation wants. I mean, look, corporations are fine. You know, they're great. They create the future. They build our infrastructure. There's a lot of good
Raise
around them.
$50 million without one.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
You do need them. Yeah.
But when it comes to creating stories, the only needs of a corporation when it comes to storytelling is for that story to sell to as many people as possible. But within that, what makes that story good, that is beyond a corporation's ability to create. They can look at spreadsheets and they can do market analysis
that's what they fucking do. And you see it in Star Wars. It's like, okay, we know people like the Millennium Falcon. Check. You know what I mean? They like, okay, this movie had this much action sequences. Let's make sure we like mirror that exact same thing. And then, but the thing is, it's like they don't know what they're doing, but they also don't seem to have any interest in learning how to do it, because it's like we've never lived in an era where you can get more feedback than right now. And you could do like a study on Twitter and just hear what did people not like about it and really do the work. And eventually you'd come to the conclusion
to binge watch something if you're involved in it.
But I mean, like, eventually they could come to the conclusion that ultimately what the fans want is just a good story. And you can't manufacture that without, you know, like allowing like a creative to do their thing. But it's like, that's the one part of their brain. It's like they won't go there, but they'll do all the other work to figure out all this other stuff, except for the one magic thing, which is just let a creator be creative and just back the fuck off, all because you don't know what you're doing. And you're not even interested in learning how to do it. So why do you assume you can? It's so arrogant.
It's a very strange thing. I mean, I think it's, by the way, somebody did ask, you put up on the screen what I did on the Dota series.
We were talking about it pre-show.
So what I do on the Dota show is I work on what's called the animatic. So obviously animation, every frame of animation, just like every frame of a visual effect, costs money. So you never want to animate something fully until you have a locked, what's called an animatic, where an animatic is basically very rudimentary. It's the shots are there, but the finished animation isn't. So you see a very rough version of the animation. So instead of going out and shooting shots with a camera, you create virtually these shots, wide shots, medium shots, close-up shots, and you have very, very rudimentary movement and things like that. So what I do is the animatics that are built, we cut them together, I refine them. So you can sit down. So I cut the show. So the show, you can actually watch the show from beginning to end in this rough state. So I cut that. And then once it's done, I work with Ashley Miller and Eugene and Zach, who Eugene's the animation director. And then Zach is Ashley's second in command. And we work together. And once we get the animatic finished, we then send it to Korea and they finish the animation, which takes 4 to 6 months. So that's what I do. And then also Ashley has me consult because, you know, obviously I've made films and things like that. I work with him on other parts of the post-production process, such as sound mixes. So I go to sessions which are called sound spotting sessions, where we watch an episode and we're like, okay, here's what I think. Here's the kinds of sound effects that we need. Like, what is it? You know, when you're shooting outside and you're recording sound, you can kind of hear where, but if you're in a castle, what does the castle sound like?
Yeah.
So when you're working in animation, you have to create that ambient noise.
That's pretty cool.
You know, so and then the composer creates, Dino, the composer, who's a fucking genius. He creates the music, and so we do it sound spotting. So we put all the sounds that we want in, and or Ashley makes notes, and we all make suggestions, and then those notes and all the pieces that we've put in are sent to be mixed, and then we get back a mix, which call it a pre-mix at first, to hear it before the final mix happens, and we make notes on that if we want something different or added or augmented, and then it goes back to the final mix, and then we get the final mix back and listen to it and then sign off on it. Wow. So most of my so I work in edit, because I've worked in post-production, editorial and post-production for a long time. Professionally, I started editing my first feature in 1993, and so that's my background is post-production and editorial mostly. But I've also produced and directed as well. So it's fun. And Dota has been a really gratifying experience because the people on it, the writing staff, everybody's very passionate about taking the Dota lore from Dota 2, the game, and incorporating that and turning, because the game has a lot of lore, but it doesn't have like long extended storylines like say Lord of the Rings, but it has a lot of traits and characteristics, and they're trying to incorporate that into the show. And it's a really surprising, like one of the things I liked about it is when I did not read the scripts until after I worked on the episodes, because I didn't want to know what happened. When I started working, I'm like, these episodes are awesome. And even though I'm working on the rough animatics, I get to sort of experience the show for the first time in a kind of a weird way. And I was always left like, oh my God, what's going to happen next?
That's awesome.
And it was so much fun to work on.
Interesting that fan, because there's a fan element to creation.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Everyone gets into it because they love it. Like that, like if you're like, that's what it is. I mean, like there's this great quote from this guy, I forgot, but it's called The Gap. Have you ever heard the Gap quote, Robert Meyer Burnett?
Yeah. But I don't remember it.
We used to used to be like a really good helpful thing during like acting school, but it was basically like most people get into stuff because they have taste, like that's why you gotta have like this taste in things. But then like when you first start doing your art doesn't match up with your taste. Like you're not as good as the thing that you want to create.
Right.
And then it's like the harder you work, the more you keep at it, the more you close that gap and get to the point where you're like, your talent matches up with your taste. Yeah. And it's like, that's a very encouraging thing. Cause it is true. I mean, it's like, my short films didn't match my taste. So it's like, oh my God, these are, like the rudimentary, but it's like what you're talking about, all that stuff. It's like, you can't imagine how much work goes into the things you completely take for granted, like the sound mix, like you're talking about, like how many hours of work, how much expertise goes into stuff like that, the levels and just the placement, the artistic placement of things like a bowl being dropped. Like it's unreal. It's a lot of work.
And also, there are always tricks to every trade. There are sound mixers that really understand things like, for instance, if you were just stop right now, your room, everyone that's watching the show right now, the room that you're in has a sound to it. Even though there might not be anything going on, there's a sound, and that's called the ambient sound, the ambient noise in the room. That's just if you were making an animated show and you didn't, you just have people talking and you didn't have an ambient sound like in a castle, whether it was a slight wind blowing or an echo, it would seem false to you. Now, you might not know why it's false, but a great sound mixer will know that. And he'll be like, well, I've got 30 different ambient noises for this room. But since this is a fantasy series, let's try this. And it wouldn't be the traditional ambience, but you're in a castle in the mountains of Carpathia, or whatever. And the sound mixer will give you an ambient noise. And you're like, oh, that's awesome. Because it gives you a level of maybe ominous. There's like, all it does is create an ominous feeling, like something's going to happen. And you might not even be aware of it. And they'll put it in the surround channels and they'll move the sound and things you don't even like
consciously aware of.
No, and that's why
but you are subconsciously aware, like you mentioned.
Right. And the sound mixers, great sound mixers they're like Rembrandt.
That's amazing.
They're literally painting with sound. And you spend weeks on a great sound mix. And even my independent movie Tango Shalom that I produced, that's on the festival circuit right now.
That's a funny name.
Yeah, Tango. It's a low budget indie film that I produced. I edited. I was the post production supervisor and the VFX supervisor on it. Wow. But our sound designer Steve Yeaman was a fanatic, and this movie was made with a very low budget. So a lot of the on location dialogue recording, because we were shooting in the streets of New York. In Brooklyn, so a lot of the time, the sound that was recorded was not usable because it was so noisy, and so he had to re-record. He had to do ADR, which is you go into a studio, automatic dialogue replacement, and you re-record. The actor re-records his dialogue or her dialogue, trying to match the mouth movement.
So awkward.
It's really hard to do. But Steve had like these
uncomfortable.
Yeah, he had these microphones, and he's a fanatic.
Stop. Is that right? No. Okay. So I have to. Okay. Stop. Like it's so weird.
It's a weird thing, but sometimes you have to do it. If you've got a great sound mixer, like one of the things about low budget movies is sound can always be an issue. But Steve, it was funny when I started. It
takes you out of it like that. The second you watch somebody's thing and like they didn't use like a microphone, they just use like whatever the mic was on their camera that they're using. You're out. You're out the second you hear that cut. You're done.
Absolutely out. And Steve spent literally, because we had the time, months refining the dialogue. And it was funny because I was there, we were sound spotting and mixing, but when I first got his final mix back and I listened to it in 5.1, I was like, this is amazing. Like even though, I'm there for the whole process and all that, and every part of a movie is like that. Like the woman that scored our film, this girl, Zoe, she's a tango artist from Greece, and she'd never scored a film before. And so it took her a while. She worked with the director's wife who was in the music business. And when I started hearing their cues coming back and I was putting them up against picture, I'm like, this is amazing. And she was finding, like, they were bringing in session players, like people that would play in the Greek National Symphony. They were just friends of hers. So she'd bring these people to come in and play their string instruments in the studio for a day. And I'm listening to I'm listening to stuff going, for our little tiny low budget movie, this is amazing. And that's what filmmaking is all about. You find all these people from different disciplines and you get them together. And that's what I love about filmmaking, is that you have all of these really talented people that do different things and you bring them together. And if you're a good director or a good producer, you know how to utilize all those elements and create something greater than the sum of its parts. Like Ashley Miller, who created Dota, the series, he had never worked in animation before.
Wow.
And he knew that, but he's a great writer. So he's like, okay, I'm going to steep myself in the Dota lore and I'm going to write these stories. But then he found other friends of mine that had worked in animation for 25 years. And he's like, look, I need you to come on to the show and help me so we can make a great show. And I think great filmmakers, great producers, great directors, they know they need great collaborators.
Fucking A. That's what Tarantino says. He says just like,
and that's what's missing.
I need you to do this and just you do it. Just however, the way you do it, just take care of that because I'm taking care of all this stuff. This is what I got. And then you let someone just do their thing. And if they're great at it, it just makes you look better. It just reflects on you because the final product has got your name on it. Let your offensive coordinator
do their job.
Yeah. You always hear directors say that that 90% of making a great movie is casting the movie properly. And when you have the leeway to cast the people who you want, not just necessarily names, but if you're really looking for, I did the documentary for the making of Usual Suspects, for instance.
Really?
Yeah. And interviewing, we have Benicio del Toro talking about Fenster, where he makes a good point. He says, in that movie, my character Fenster's only point in the story is to die. He's one of the first suspects that dies. So I could have played that part normally, or I could have gone off the rails and off the reservation and created a flip you for real. You don't understand what he's saying. And he's like, so I said to Bryan Singer, the director, I'll bring you this character. And if you don't like the character, we'll do another character. And so Bryan went with him. The first day they started shooting, like the other actors were coming up to Bryan going, like Gabriel Byrne's like, can you understand what Benicio del Toro is saying? And Bryan's like, listen, this is his choice. And it was my choice to cast him. And it's his choice to bring the character in. And he was doing his thing. And Bryan even said, listen, if you don't understand what he's saying during the scene while we're shooting it, ask. Say, what did he say?
That's pretty cool.
And so, yeah, and they did all of that. And Benicio, if you watch Usual Suspects and you see his character, you can't not love him because he's so kind of weird and strange. And Fenster becomes, and that was people collaborating. No, I'm not saying that every actor, should be able to you let them off their leash to do these kinds of things. You have to have a certain synergy between
most actors need like a BDSM relationship with the director. Like the director needs to be in control of all the things. And look, the thing is, it's because by nature actors are insecure. I know that, like I am and always was. And it was like, and you can't see yourself. So if you look like a fool, you have no idea until you see it on the screen. And it's utterly mortifying to go through that. So it's like you really have to trust the director that he's got your back and he's not going to make you look like an asshole. So it's like you do kind of need to just give it like, all right, did we get it? Did we nail it? Like you have to like be, trusting of him. But to what you're saying about Del Toro, I always admired actors who just like, I had to learn a lot of the technical stuff, like imagining how I fit into the story. Like, it's not just all about my performance. It's like, you also have to like, you just see the whole thing. And some actors have that vision like almost immediately, like they just get it. It's like, damn, that is impressive. I wish I had like instincts like that.
Yeah. One of the first actors, I've only directed one movie, but the first person I cast in that movie was Eric McCormack, who played Will on Will and Grace.
Oh, cool.
And he had just come down from Canada. He'd been acting in Canada, but he was theatrically trained. And, I always worry, he likes props. He likes stuff to fiddle with, like in a scene.
Mm-hmm.
And I was worried because I was also editing the movie. I'm like, actors who, if they do something different on each take, like you go in for a close-up or you're a medium shot or a wide shot, if they're fiddling with something and they don't do the same movements exactly the same every time, it won't edit. You have edit continuity problems. He, because he was theatrically trained, had trained himself when he's doing stuff with props. It was part of his performance. So he was able to duplicate that every single time.
That's amazing.
And I was blown away by this. And, he was the first person we read for this movie that had a lot of roles. And I didn't know this because after I saw him perform, it was in the audition. I'm like, fine, you're hired.
In the room,
and my casting director's like, you can't say that. I'm like, yeah, I can't. I didn't understand protocol.
Right.
I'm like, dude, you're hired. I'm like, call his agent. What do we need to do? You're in the movie. and I didn't, in my exuberance and my enthusiasm, I didn't, and he hadn't got Will and Grace yet, so nobody really knew who he was.
Right.
I was just blown away in the audition. I'm like, I couldn't imagine anyone who, and of course I did see other people. My casting director was like, well, we have to see some other people. I'm like, fine. Nobody held a candle to him. I mean, it was, and one of the things that people don't realize.
But it would have sucked if they did. And that happened to me once. So they booked it in the room. They're like, you got it. And then like, I called them the next day and they're like, oh, we went with someone else. It was like,
yeah, I mean, I don't think I would have, but what was really interesting to me is whenever casting is rough because you want the casting director and the director and the producer, anybody who's sitting in that room, every time somebody walks through the door, you want them to blow you away. You never not want somebody to be great, or at least, and they could be great actors, but just not right for the role, and you want people to do that. And I think this is kind of an interesting story. So I was casting a bit part of a waitress. It was kind of a throwaway part. And this waitress is the line that she was supposed to say is one of the characters. Eric asks, well, where's my food? You know what? Where is it? And the line was, the woman says, well, there was a fight in the kitchen. And Eric says, what does that mean? There's not enough pepper on this. There's too much salt on that. And the actress says, there was a fight in the kitchen, sir. And she walks off. So this actress that I didn't know, a friend of a friend. So I'm like, yeah, I'll see her. So she said, there was a fight in the kitchen. And then I'm reading with her. I go, what do you mean? There was a fight in the kitchen. There's too much salt on this and not enough on that. And she, in the room, had already made this choice. She knew the line, it was an inconsequential part. So she signed as if she was deaf. She said, I'm done there when the fight in the kitchen. And she was speaking it, doing like she was using sign language to say that line. And I laughed out loud because she took a nothing part and turned it into something that was not on the page and turned it into a joke that wasn't there before. Now, and I'm not saying that every actor should do that, but she knew that this was just a bit part, like a walk-on part, but she turned it into something that elevated what was already on the page and made it better. Yeah. And I was like, again, I told my casting director, she's hot. I didn't say it in the room. I said, we got to hire her. And I thought, that was a great hire. But on the other hand, she never did it when we were shooting quite as well. And that might be my own perception because it was the first time I'd ever heard it. And she
Sometimes jokes just don't work better than the first time you do it. Like it's hard to duplicate because the expectation is there, like that lack of and you're not expecting her to say or do anything, and neither is she. Maybe it was just an inspired moment. She just threw it out there, and that is tough to duplicate, man. That's a tough thing.
Duplicate moments.
But again, I think that great filmmakers understand that those moments happen, and if you encourage a place where especially actors are allowed to play a little bit. Now we don't really, there isn't enough time to rehearse. You hear back like movies were made 10 years ago or 20 years ago or 30 years ago where the director and his actors had a week to rehearse and just play with the characters. That's like invaluable because, now we're going to start on day one and we just expect to capture lightning in a bottle every single day. And that's kind of silly to me.
I can't tell you the amount of times I got the scene after we shot it. I was like, oh, that was the scene. You know what I mean? But it was already shot. There's like, it's already done because now the pressure's off and your brain's actually working like in a proper way. But it's like, it takes time. You have to unlock these things. And sometimes you don't even see it from the creator's point of view. Like like the few things that I wrote, I was like, oh, that's what this is. And it just all of a sudden it melds and works. And you need time to work on it. You can't it's not a fucking machine. It's not a factory. It's not a widget. It's an artistic process.
And that's why, nowadays we're spending $150 million on these movies. And I think one of the great things that they did, and I really believe that it was Peter Jackson that sort of pioneered this on the first Lord of the Rings trilogy, is that they build in time for reshoots. Because you'd think on a $150 million movie to think that you're going to get magic each and every day and that every scene is going to work is absurd. So like everyone, it's people kind of understand now, but a couple of years back, like, so-and-so, this movie's being reshot. They're going in for reshoots and people would talk, it's going to be terrible. Well, no, now on larger properties, they build in a reshoot, a planned reshoot because, you're cutting a movie together and you're looking at it and you're like, you know what? On paper, this read properly, but based on what we've got now, what we've shot, what we've seen, it would be great if we could go back and sort of rejigger this scene and change things around and add a little bit more that'll help us tell the story. And I think that's actually a really good thing. So that's not saying that some films are a disaster and they have to be reshot.
Reshoot a couple weeks before you're filming.
That can be problematic. So it's not always a good thing, but
there's like an example I can think of. I hate to give this guy any kind of shine, but Rian Johnson's Brick, which I thought was a terrific movie.
Me too. I love it.
I really loved it. But the ending, I don't know if you ever saw the special features. I mean, the ending, the original ending is horrific. Like you cannot believe that's the ending that they shot.
It's. I just watched that Blu-ray recently. And
staggering. It's like in a football field, and she's just explaining everything. It's so clunky and bad. And it was like they're like, let's go with a different. They went and reshot it, and it's like it really. If that was the ending, that film would have been a disaster. It would have been completely forgettable. No one would have like remembered it or wouldn't have been like a relatively historic film. But like because they went back, like learned, reshot, it's so much better.
No, and I think it takes talented people to recognize that this ending doesn't work. And what we can do to make it better. And I think that's part of the filmmaking process. And that's the thing. Movies are very iterative. The Lord of the Rings movies were a perfect example of that. They were constantly changing things around and shooting things. This doesn't work, and going back and fixing things. And famously, when they were scoring the Two Towers, they didn't even have the Ents, the giant trees attacking Saruman's fortress at Isengard. That wasn't even in the end of the movie.
No way.
And Peter Jackson's like, we have to have this. We have to have the Ents attacking Isengard.
Yeah.
And so he calls Weta Digital from London where they're scoring the movie. And he says, listen, man, I need you guys to come up with little vignettes, like little things that are going to happen in each part of this battle. And let's get it on and let's make this happen. And they did. And it makes the end of that movie.
Could you imagine if that wasn't there? Then there would be no arc for the Ents at all.
Nope.
Wow.
Right. Real quick, I had to there's been a super chat and I wanted to get to it. It's just a $5 super chat, but we appreciate every super chat. I can't believe anyone pays me anything. And Rob Altus just said, VW, keep it going. He said it a while ago. I hope you're still here, Rob. I'm sorry it took me a minute to see a super chat. And also, there's a few things from the chat in general. We got a couple questions from another Robert. Our Robert asking about he said that R&B the Martyr horror movie you recommended was great. Can you suggest any other in that caliber?
Well, Martyrs is, for those of you who don't know, don't watch the American remake. Martyrs is a very rough, very surprising horror film that isn't for everybody, but it left my jaw on the floor. Like, I'm always looking for philosophically relevant horror. And when I would say that, like, for instance, I don't know if you guys have ever seen a movie called The Invitation, but I believe it's on Netflix. Karen Kusama directed it. If you want to see a really interesting horror film, don't read anything about it. Just go in cold. And it's just a movie that's about a dinner party at a house. That's all you need to know. It's just a dinner party.
It's a sequel to Clue.
It's not like that, but it's surprising. But so Martyrs is a French language horror film, and I kept reading reviews of it in articles like in Fangoria, and I'm like, I couldn't tell, like, what is this movie about? You know, and I was like, I couldn't, and I literally started watching it, and my jaw hit the floor.
Wow.
And while it's not very pleasant, and I don't know how much fun it was to watch, it certainly blew me away. I'm like, oh my god,
how much fun!
And Islington girl apparently was blown away. She said, "I seen the Invitation, very different, and went in blind and was like, whoa."
Yeah, see, that's what I want from horror. And you know, growing up, look, I love the Friday the 13th movies. I love the Nightmare on Elm Street films. But to me, my favorite horror movies are more along the lines of like The Fly. You know, the Jeff Goldblum Fly, and I like movies that have something to say because. You know, horror is the one genre where you can delve into the human experience and examine things that we might not be proud of in terms of ourselves. And I've always loved that about great, or you can have just a horror movie, ghosts, and it can just scare you. But I like those films that are disturbing. Like I like the original Hellraiser. And so there's another movie. It's a lot more. I've always said that if you really want a great French horror double feature, watch Martyrs, and then once you're ready to slit your throat open and scoop your eyeballs out, go then watch another French horror movie called Inside. And Inside, both of these movies have been remade in English terribly, but watch Inside, and again, don't read anything about these movies. There's another good movie, a British horror film called The Ritual, about these guys that go on a hike through the woods to honor their friend who's died. I really like that. Recently, there's another French movie called Raw. If you haven't seen Raw,
I haven't seen any of these. I feel bad, like I can't contribute to this conversation at all.
There's some really good. But again, these are not necessarily traditional, the kind of horror movies that people are thinking about. But they are sort of disturbing. There's another movie that came out that David Cronenberg's son Brandon Cronenberg made called Possessor. That's kind of a sci-fi horror film. If you watch the uncut version, again, not as great as I wanted it to be, but it's still interesting. I mean, that's what I'm kind of looking for. A lot of people don't like that from their horror movies, but obviously one of your viewers liked The Invitation. Is that Islington Girl? Is that who is it? The Islington Girl? She liked it. Yeah. So she's, to me, I think the Islington Girl and I park our shuttlecrafts in the same shuttle bay. We like. Yeah. Go watch it's a little slow at first, but when stuff happens. Yeah, and like Ari Aster's movies, like Hereditary and Midsummer, those are pretty interesting, and I like those kind of slow burn horror films. So The Invitation is really interesting because you're watching this and you're like, what is this movie really about? Like I'd only heard about it, and I'm watching it, and then stuff happens. Vinny Art said he saw The Ritual.
Yeah, he says like The Ritual. I saw the one, Robert. The Ritual is great.
And another
he's the
movie,
answer to the question, where's the talent? Because Vinny Art is a talented creator. He's doing comics, and he's been crowdfunded. He's been a crowdfunded comic. I think that's where a lot of the creators are going into independent realms.
I completely agree.
Independent, so I just want to highlight him as well. But he also watched like The Ritual.
Yeah, and you know, I think what's really great is we now live in an age where creators. I mean, look at what Ethan Van Sciver did with Cyberfrog. You know, he made a ton of money. He's going directly to his audience, and whether or not, forget what you think about Ethan Van Sciver. You know, you might not like his politics or what he has to say, but as a business person, he demands your respect because he was able to go out there, create his own IP, go directly rather than using middlemen or publishers or whatever. He went right to his own audience, and his audience funded his work. And by the way, I'm with Sentient. I loved Hereditary and I hated Midsummer. I agree with you. But I have a friend that just
he's agreeing with Sense of Dildo. That'll make his head even bigger.
But I think that's really cool that we live in this day and age where you can actually reach out to your audience and go with them directly.
It's fascinating. And I think, quite frankly, for like what Robert Meyer Burnett's doing, at least the way he talks about the comic industry, it sounds like he's infinitely more successful for doing it that way too. Like he talks about his contemporaries who worked for DC and Marvel their whole lives, and they're like broke because they were just hired guns who didn't really they spent all this time, they got these great, runs out there, but they don't get like big money off of it. It just all goes to the company.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that that's to be admired, and he gets his product out to his customers, his patrons, and that's a really respectable, laudable thing. And what's interesting to me is like I didn't grow up in a world thinking that I had to agree with everybody, but the people that I even disagree with, I have a healthy respect for people that I could vehemently disagree with. But I might respect their intellect and their opinions and what they've done with their lives. And I think we have a fundamental lack of respect for our fellow human beings. I think that is probably the single biggest problem that we have in our world today. There's a complete lack of respect for other people. And even people that are now trying to do good, if you want to call yourself a social justice warrior, there is a way of being that way where you can still respect people that you might hate. But instead, everybody comes at everybody else from the position of, well, I know better than you, so you better suck up what I believe, buddy, or I'm going to go and destroy your life. And it's like, where does that come from? Who put you in that position? If you're speaking truth, your truth should be self-evident. Your truth should be something that we can come to an agreement on after a careful examination of the facts. But nowadays, people just say, this is the way I want the world to be. And if it's not this way right now, you're the enemy. Yeah. And I'm going to go after your livelihood. And it's like, wait, what?
A lot of people are disingenuous, though. A lot of people are just using these things as means to get clout, and therefore they don't even have a genuine basis for whatever they're championing. And in a lot of cases, they've kind of destroyed or at least sullied whatever the name of whatever they're championing, to where somebody, when you said inclusion earlier, said, oh, inclusion, because that just means to us, especially in this thing, okay, we're going to get something that's poorly written and that everyone's just going to hide behind, well, this is a gay and black and this, so therefore there's nothing good. Like I said, when Batwoman, when it was casted, I said, hey, the creators feel like they're done because they casted a black woman. They're not going to try anything at all, and that seems to have come to pass as far as writing has gone. It's like there's no. You talked about doing Dota, and there was love. There's always, I think there needs to be love for people who are working on something creative, and if that's not there.
Like I remember when the Milestone universe, where Dwayne McDuffie and like Dennis Cowan were working on the Milestone universe for DC, which is it was an adjunct. It was all black creators. Yeah. And they were creating characters like Static and Icon. And, they were saying, yeah, we're black creators, but they're not like, buy our books because we're black. Right. They were black creators that were making great comic books, and I'm like, well, this is pretty rad, and I was
a popular show for its era.
Yeah, and I'm reading these comics, and I really liked them, but they weren't beating me over the head. There were black protagonists in these comics made by black creators, and I thought that was really cool. It was an interesting voice. They were delving into subject matter that isn't traditionally dealt with in comics in a really cool way, and I'm like, great.
Did either of you guys, sorry to interrupt, but did either of you guys see Just Some Guy's video about like SJWs and villains?
Oh, dude. First of all, I love his channel.
Ditto.
I love Just Some Guy. For those of you who don't watch his channel, first of all, he's very smart. Genius. He's very funny.
Yep.
He's very funny, and I really think that his channel, and that's somebody that I think some people would say that, oh, why do you watch his channel? He's like negative, and I'm like, I don't see him as being negative. I see him as always delivering thoughtful social commentary wrapped in a fan bow, and I think that's really great. And I never miss one of his videos.
And
I think he calls people out, and rightfully so, but he's not mean about it necessarily. I mean, he's cutting and caustic.
He's cutting, sure. He says what he really believes, but he's not a jerk.
No, he's backing that stuff up. He's using people's own words. He's saying, okay, you said this. Let's run this down. And I think a lot of people nowadays, there's not a lot of cogent discourse. And even if you disagree with somebody, disagree with them for the right reasons. And if you're going to go after them for the right reasons and demand that they be held accountable for what they say. And I think that Just Some Guy is a great example of that. He, I've streamed with him a couple times, and he watches stuff I've done, and I have mad respect for him, and I love when he drops a video, because I've also learned things about the comic industry, because I love comic books, but I only buy omnibuses now. There's nothing that's coming out recently, especially from DC and Marvel, that I'm particularly interested in anymore, which makes me sad, considering I have thousands of comics and omnibuses in this where I'm sitting. But
I'll say that video about SJWs and villains he nailed it. Like, I think that I want to make a video about his video because of how much he really cracked it. It's like,
he really did.
That's really what it is. It's like
the Fourth Age has talked about that as well, just how they identify with the villains.
Because they are the villain.
They are the villain.
In real life, they are the villain. And it's like, oh my, like, it was so, he did it. He figured it out. I was like, wow, like that should now be.
Villains think they're the hero.
Yeah, dude, it was really something else. And I think it's so insightful to the way they talk about culture, the way they interact with people, and the way they make entertainment. It was fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny to me. The truth of storytelling is self-evident, because ultimately, what is a story? What is the function of a story? A story is supposed to convey through narrative shared human experience. Whatever happens to the protagonist and what's going on within the body of a story, there's human truths there that the author of that story is hoping to convey to others, to the audience. So to me, stories have their own truths that are very self-evident. And one of the reasons that I think, for instance, I don't want to cause a huge stir but The Last Jedi. The Last Jedi was not truthful when it came to the character of Luke Skywalker. Now, I understand what Rian Johnson, and I respect Rian Johnson. I've liked the films he's made. But in the case of and by the way, he was dealt a hand of cards that J.J. Abrams gave him at the end of Force Awakens anyway. But if you're a kid and you watch you're 8 years old right now, and you discover Star Wars and you watch them in order. When you get to the end of Return of the Jedi, the galaxy is liberated, the rebels have won, Luke Skywalker is a full-fledged Jedi, he confronts Vader, he takes out the Emperor with Vader's help, all is right with the world. And then you're finishing that movie and you are streaming on Disney Plus, and then you go to episode 7, The Force Awakens. What does that movie do but completely destroy everything that's in Return of the Jedi? There is
literally everything. There's no progression.
There's and it makes your characters that you've now followed look like idiots.
It invalidates everything they did.
And it turns Han Solo into Han Solo has lost the Millennium Falcon.
He lost the Millennium Falcon. He broke up with Leia. He's not only did his relationship with Leia not go well, it was so bad they actually created the next Darth Vader. That's how bad their relationship went. That's like that the relationship you're rooting for, that you're invested in. Actually, he creates new space Hitler.
And not only that, they've allowed the First Order to come about and to build a planetary-sized super weapon that had to have taken at least, we know the Death Star took about 20 years to build. Mm-hmm. So how long did it take to build Starkiller Base? And who allowed all those contractors out of their union contracts to go build that thing for the First Order?
And no one missed the missing star?
I mean,
No one picked up on it.
I mean, you look at this kind of thing, and this is my problem. And I'll tell you, to me, The Force Awakens, and this, by the way, I don't blame Kathleen Kennedy for this. I blame the fact that Disney's mandate was probably like, okay, we have to make a new Star Wars saga, but we can't rely on Luke, Han, Leia, R2, 3PO. These are characters that are pushing 70. You know, we can't. We're Disney. We can't do that.
I think it's a little more malicious than that. I think it more has to do with the rights to the merchandise. Is that I think Lucas retained them, and they're like, well, if we can get rid of them, if we can get rid of them, then we can like start establish this new series for the next 50 years that we'll just cash checks on.
No, all of that was part of it. I think all of that was part of it. But that was corporate thinking. That was corporate thinking. What they don't understand is that, wait a minute, are you telling me like any filmmaker, and I don't know why J.J. Abrams and why Lawrence Kasdan and why everybody who made The Force Awakens went this way, but are you telling me you're going to put Luke, Han, Leia, Chewie, R2, and 3PO in a movie together, and you're not going to have them share scenes?
Not one.
You're not going to have them like to me. This is, and I saw a video. Chris Gore was talking about this from Film Threat. He goes, and I love this word. He said, "This is studio malpractice."
Yeah,
and
I love that.
Thought I did too. I was like, man, yeah. And if you committed malpractice in a hospital, you get sued.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, how do you take R2-D2, who was heroic in 6 previous movies, and literally throw a tarp over him the whole movie? He's literally got a tarp over him over in the corner, so you can add your mirth-filled BB-8 droid that'll be more kids. Kids already have their R2s. Mm-hmm. We need to sell a new merch. You know, let's give the Millennium Falcon a square or a rectangular dish, so J.J. Abrams can carve out for Bad Robot a little bit of that cheddar, that merchandising cheddar, because whenever you sell a 3PO with a red arm or a Millennium Falcon with a rectangular dish, we know it's from The Force Awakens, so we get some of that money. I mean, that's great.
Same thing about Grogu, everyone in the chat. I know you guys hate it.
The thing is, they could have had their cake and ate it too if they just respected the story. Like what I thought would have been interesting was like, okay, you do have to give their characters a journey. So if they're already the biggest heroes in the galaxy, what are they just going to become more heroic by the next, So it's like maybe the Republic has become kind of like this, maybe it's contentious in the government, or maybe Luke's gotten complacent and he's not really active and he's letting other evils come, and he has to be reminded by even like a young Rey or something. Like there's a way to do that story.
Yes, there is. And
it's just that it's so poorly conceived. Like I listened to all of Mahler's videos about The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi, and I like re-listened to them, and it's like the complete lack of world building in The Force Awakens alone is disturbing. Like it's genuinely disturbing when you have $1 billion franchise on your hands, and it's like you didn't really consider what the Republic was before you started shooting this thing. Like you didn't even imagine what the world looked like right now. What was the progression of events? Like who's in power, who isn't? Where's Luke? Where's Han's? Like you're just gonna pull them out when you need them. It's like,
I completely agree. Like they should have had, and what's interesting is you read like a lot of these explanations in the visual dictionary from The Force Awakens, and they have like somebody who's writing the visual dictionary is going, well, this doesn't make any sense. So let's figure this out and come up with a backstory. But like what you just said, these are questions that you have to sit down and go, okay, 30 years have gone by in the Star Wars galaxy. I'll bet you we could pull 10 people that are watching the stream right now, put them in a room with the 3 of us and go, all right, let's run it down. Where do you all think that the galaxy is 30 years after the end of Return of the Jedi? What's going on? And we could go around the room and everybody would have some pretty good ideas. You're like, oh, okay, that's interesting. And let's say we wanted, like, Luke is at a crossroads in his life 30 years later. Why is he at a crossroads? What might have happened? And you could come up with all these things. And like you just said, come up with a story that people will be like, that's a good story.
Yeah.
But Force Awakens, like, it's this weird there. I think what's really interesting is Force Awakens doesn't really have a story. It has it's all like you're watching various cut scenes of a video game.
It was a trailer.
And then there's no, like, who is Lars von Seca? When you meet Max von Sydow at the beginning of this movie, they act in this scene in the opening of Force Awakens they act like you're already supposed to know who Poe Dameron is.
Yeah.
And you're already, because they don't introduce these characters. It's like you came in right after a commercial break of a TV show and you're playing catch up the whole time. I'm like, who is this guy? You can't just tell me he's a great pilot, because what does that mean? I don't know who he is.
And
other
who
than
cares? For who? Who does he fly for? Is he for the Republic? He's with this new thing called the Resistance. What the fuck is the Resistance? What are you resisting against?
Right,
You're
right.
in power.
That would be the biggest sin of the trilogies.
I mean, I don't want to get totally derailed on this, but these are questions. These are questions, and when you're showing these movies to a corporation, there's a lot of people that obviously Force Awakens made $2 billion. So the answer is, well, everybody who made Force Awakens was correct. They were right. But again, you're not taking into consideration that people love Star Wars. There's multi-generations of people that love Star Wars, and you're putting everyone's favorite characters back in that movie. And not in the way they wanted them back, but they didn't know that yet. And so of course it was going to make.
Look, success aside, they did this without a plan.
Right.
That's what I was trying to say. Yeah, that's the biggest sin. Even if you say, okay, evil corporation aside, this is what boggles my mind. Big corporation, we're trying to make money. We want to make money. Wouldn't you want, okay, what is the beginning, middle, of end, so we can line up all our marketing?
Right.
Where are the toys for the Rise of Soy Walker? Do they exist? Wouldn't you want everything lined up? Wouldn't you need a beginning, middle, to end? Because we're going to spend about 10 years plus or ever doing Star Wars movies and making merchandise and selling Star Wars parks. So we need a outline. What is your beginning, middle, and end? And that is the biggest sin. Even if it was an unsatisfactory beginning, middle, and end, and I'd argue the prequels kind of are already, we would have been happy with a vision throughout, and there was none. It was just, hey, let's make a trailer, and then it was like, hey, let me just switch all the expectations because and then it was just the third one.
Well, JJ's just a bad writer. Like, he thinks writing is like this explorative process, which it is, but it's also rewriting. You don't just come up with an idea and imagine I'll pay that off later. Like, you have come up with an idea and then you pay it off yourself and then you restructure it. And that's how you write something. It's like, I can't believe I have to explain this to one of the most famous and successful directors in history, but he doesn't seem to understand it.
Well, he's made in my mind, 5 bad science fiction films. He made 2 bad Star Trek movies. Super 8 is a bad Spielberg homage, and Force Awakens and Rise of Skywalker are what
disasters.
They are.
They're
I mean, the funny thing about it is
the most profitable for IP in movies.
Yeah, I it's such a weird thing. And now the thing about Grogu, I just want to, to me, Favreau and Filoni doing The Mandalorian, they kind of understood, was Grogu something that was shameless? Perhaps. But the idea that we know that there's Yaddle in the prequel trilogy, so Yoda, there's other Yoda-esque, there's other people of Yoda's race.
Yodai,
and to meet a new one, I thought was what a genius idea. Because you never think about, okay, for 900 years have I trained Jedi. Yoda's been around for a long time. Why wouldn't there be new members of his race?
Yeah.
Nothing
wrong with that.
And I'm like, that was pretty, that was a lot of fun. And then to lead up to the fact that he's a Force user and give us Luke Skywalker at the height of his Jedi powers coming in to pick him up at the end. That to me, I'm like, well, this is the kind of thinking that you want. I
still don't think they had a plan with The Mandalorian, but I think that they're more like wise and intelligent writers where they imagined a plan like halfway through. They're like, oh, that would work. That would actually make sense. You know what I mean?
I agree. And you see it developing, once because they don't know.
They did with the sequels. I don't know if they necessarily immediately planned to pay off Grogu the second season, and that may have been an audible, but there definitely was some sort of the whole premise is we have to get Grogu to his race or something.
Well,
right.
Was it though? I mean, was that from the beginning?
No, I bet it wasn't. I bet it, but these are people that understand. Like, at first they had to see if I think it worked at all.
Yeah.
And once it was developing and they knew it worked at all, they're using that new stagecraft technology and they're doing things. And I think that, look, there's a lot of The Mandalorian that I think is wonky. In the first season, the Mandalorians are down the street from the crime bosses that are down the street from the Empire. It's like everybody's on the same street. And there's things like that was a little weird. Like we're the Mandalorian, we're underground, we're secret, but yet our base is next door to this other guy. Like, it was weird.
And it's a small universe too. Like there's only like 3 planets, and like one of them's fucking Tatooine. Of course it is. It's like
yeah, and they have to go back to the
Mandalorian.
So there was a lot of wackiness, but the thing is, the spirit was there.
That's true.
You know, the verve and the fun of it all, like when all those Mandalorians show up in all their armor and kick ass, I'm like, hell yeah, you know,
it
that's
looked cool. And it had, like, they do a lot of practical effects too, which to me shows passion, that they didn't want to just be like this clunky CGI fest. They really wanted to like make it look like it's got texture. And yeah, I mean, there's something there, but it's still like, it just feels a little hollow. Like there's good ideas that kind of are inconsistently strung together.
Yeah.
Like,
although I think,
like
I think they've, by this latter half of the second season, I think they were really cooking. Like that scene with Bill Burr confronting the Imperial officer, talking about what happened on that massacre occurred, that civilian massacre. That scene, you learn more about the Empire and how because we'd never had somebody converse and talk about their actions from the Imperial side at length. And I'm like, wow, okay, now this show has sort of come into its own. And that final episode where you got Bo-Katan and you got all these kind of characters, Fennec Shan and all these people coming back, I'm like, okay, they now know what this is supposed to be. And I'm thinking, okay, this is awesome because you've got Filoni, you've got Favreau, you've got a strong creative team. They're bringing on bespoke directors. You know, let's get Taika Waititi to do one. And even bringing in Bryce Dallas Howard. She comes from Ron Howard. My dad's taught me what I know. She was able to do a lot of really.
I'm more
interesting
interested
stuff.
in fucking Robert Rodriguez being there.
And Robert Rodriguez, his episode with Boba Fett, that kicked ass. That first one that was great.
Having no script basically.
And now he's doing the Book of Boba Fett. And I think they've really got a bunch of people that are having a great time making this, that want to do stuff that's cool. So I'm excited to see where it goes.
I mean, I appreciate that. I'm so skeptical though. Like, I just feel like I've been burnt so many times. It's like for me to get my hopes up, it's like, okay, bringing my girlfriend back, but you're not going to cheat on me this time, right?
Yes.
You know, like,
real quick. I have to I don't want to wait too long for super chats because I appreciate each and every one. Man of War 665, neighbor of the beast, who was Matt's first super chat. You never forget your first. He's one of my early ones. Says, what do you mean we need a plan? I do want to clarify my point about I agree that Mandalorian. I don't think both seasons were planned out, but I do think there was it was much more coordination in that story than the story that the prequel or the sequel trilogy told.
Especially in season 2.
Yeah, and I think the tail end of season 2, even though I predicted, at least in my opinion correctly, that Luke Skywalker was a bait and switch. And I hope I'm wrong. We'll see. We'll see what the Book of Boba Fett. I'm a little sour. I'm very soured on a lot of the stuff Disney has done. But speaking of which, this is somebody said in the chat, and I haven't seen it, so I can't really criticize. But what is your opinion of Loki? Because if I remember correctly, you're one of the more positive on Loki the series.
Oh yeah, no, I'm really enjoying it because it first of all, to me, what I really appreciate about Marvel is they go back to their comic books for source material. They're not like everything they've done. The fact that they went back to Ed Brubaker's run on Captain America, where he created the Winter Soldier. Now, it's not a perfect adaptation of the Winter Soldier comic storyline, nor should it be because it's an adaptation. But the fact that they looked back to that for a character, they're taking all of this stuff out of the comics. And the Time Variance Authority in Loki was created by Walt Simonson in the pages of Thor. So they're in the 80s. So they're going back and they're looking at their own history to develop these stories. Now, there's I think a lot of people now are allowing their fear or their hatred of a lot of woke storytelling to cloud their judgment as to whether or not something is good or not.
We talk about that sometimes. We kind of wonder if we're jumping at shadows, and are we closed-minded to literally everything? But in my opinion, look, we're we're in media PTSD right now, and we've been through a lot. And it's like how you can't blame me if I'm a little punchy at, you just every single thing that gets made getting destroyed. Like it's like the whole thing with Kevin Smith and He-Man. He's like, well, wait and see it. It's like, fuck you, wait and see it. Like, how many times do I have to go through this? And like, it's not like at the end, once I did go through it and I had a good point about it, you'd be like, yeah, no, that's true. Like, you'd still fight me. And like Vigilante said, you'd call me toxic. So it's like, I'm just not really patient any longer. You kind of earned up all my goodwill. I sort of spent it, and now it's gone. And sorry if I'm a little sensitive.
Well, no, that very valid point. But I would say this, in the first episode of Loki, like I was streaming with Az, and we were having an argument about Loki. Like I liked it a lot, and he didn't like it at all. He's like, oh, it negates the value of the whole Marvel universe. And I was trying to explain in the Infinity Stones, I was trying to explain, no. And then on episode, and he was talking about, well, what about free will? In the second episode, Loki says, this is bullshit. What about free will? Are you telling me that I have no free will, that all of this predetermined? So they're dealing with this stuff in the show. And I think for what we're getting, it's really, I'm finding it fascinating. I've really enjoyed the first 2 episodes. I thought they were really, really good. And I can't wait to see where it's going to go. Now, people think, they get mad like, oh, there's going to be a female Loki. And I'm like, okay, but let's see where it's going to go. Now, I thought WandaVision started very strong, but unfortunately it didn't go to the places I would have hoped it went. I didn't live up to what I'd hoped. And then Falcon and the Winter Soldier, I thought, unfortunately, if you watch the making of, they had to really shift what it was about, because literally they were dealing with a pandemic within the show. Like that was part of the story that they had to change up. But I'll tell you one thing, the central idea of that show, where you brought in the Isaiah Bradley character, again, coming from a great comic miniseries called The Truth from the early aughts, his central argument with Sam Wilson is that America is never going to let a black man become Captain America. That's what Isaiah Bradley said. He was somebody who was experimented on. He was a stand-in for what really happened, the Tuskegee experiments, the fact that the United States would not allow black soldiers to avail themselves of the GI Bill when they returned from World War II. All of these things he was standing in, just like in the comic series. And they had a really interesting debate. And at the central core of Falcon and Winter Soldier was Sam Wilson saying, yeah, I know all that. I know this is a racist fucking country. And yet I choose to be above all of this. And I'm going to stand as an example, and I'm going to be Captain America, because at the beginning of the show, he's like, I'm not, I can't hack it. Steve Rogers instilled in me. He gave me the shield. I am not worthy of stepping up to the plate, and he gives this shield to the Smithsonian. And by the end of that show, because of his experience, he says, you know what? I can take on the mantle. I'm going to take on the mantle of Captain America, despite all that. And I think that, which is the core story of Falcon and the Winter Soldier, is a really important story to tell. It harks back to the Marvel comic universe. It brings in the character of Isaiah Bradley that dealt with these very difficult concepts about it is not woke necessarily to go in and tell the story, to have a proxy character that talks about the injustices that were done to black American soldiers in World War II. I thought that was absolutely the way to deal with it, is in the context of fantasy and science fiction, because it's more palatable for people than banging them over the head with these social issues. Well, that's why Gene Roddenberry did it in Star Trek, and Rod Serling did it in The Twilight Zone, and they were really good at it. And people will be more open-minded.
They're not good
at it. And I have an anecdote. I have an anecdote, a very recent anecdote. I went to a store with my Batman shirt, and so the lady at the cashier is constantly asking me about like superhero stuff. So she did not understand why Falcon gave up the shield. And this is a black lady. This is an older black lady. She's like, I didn't get that. I didn't understand. It didn't connect to her. And the reason is because she didn't come to Falcon and the Winter Soldier to get a history lesson on the Tuskegee Airmen. She could have looked up the Tuskegee experiment if she wanted to. Just like I didn't. And I'm a black guy. I'm not on camera because mask and everything. But like I don't like that. I don't. You don't have the sensitivity to tell that story in a comic book story. Don't make the Tulsa Black Wall Street thing a bunch of brainwashed people. Don't do that. I think you cheapen the stories by doing that, and you miss out on the core. And so my point is, you would think that this older black lady would be a target audience for what you're trying to say, and yet she doesn't even connect on it because that's not why she's coming here. She didn't come to get Chinese food from Pizza Hut. She wanted an action oriented, Marvel.
Some people
MCU
escape
show.
this shit. Some people actually don't want to live in the past and live in pain all the time and be reminded of all the bad things that happened. Some people want to turn the TV on and actually forget about that shit.
Well, but I completely agree with you. But if you look at some of our great science fiction, fantasy, and horror programming, a lot of it is in fact allegorical.
I agree.
And like one of the great episodes. Well, I don't know if it's a great episode. I would say I call it a meat and potatoes episode of Star Trek. It's an episode from the second season, the original series, called "A Private Little War." And in this episode, there is a group of primitive hill people that are existing with the villagers, and they hate each other. And the villagers are being armed by the Klingon Empire. The Klingons are giving them flintlock rifles, primitive weapons, but still weapons they shouldn't have. And the hill people are getting picked off. It's totally an allegory for Vietnam, because they couldn't exactly talk about Vietnam. They weren't allowed to do that on television in the late 60s. So in the episode, Kirk comes down because he knows he used to stay with one of the guys who's part of the hill people. And he's like, look, and there's a great conversation where McCoy and Kirk are literally yelling at each other. Kirk is like, we have to arm the hill people so they can defend themselves against the village people. Not that sing YMCA. And Kirk is like, and the doctor's like, you can't do that. You are condemning these people year after year, decade after decade of an endless war. This was heady stuff. And it's directly referring to the war in Southeast Asia, not by name.
But Robert, it's an abstraction. It's not a one-for-one explaining the situation. Like it would be like going to another planet and then there's Asian people there and they're fighting against like Americans. Like they don't have any artistic abstraction. It's like you said allegory. Well, that's not an allegory. They're explaining the situation. It's blunt. It beats you over the head. Like I was talking last night about The Wire. Now, apparently The Wire, how it works on the second level, that it's about Iraq and Afghanistan. That's like a dual.
Oh, I don't know about that.
That's what David Simon says that. That's David Simon's words. Really? He says that. Yeah. And it's my point is, if he's going to comment on that, like, it's like he's so complex. He's commenting on it like adjacent. He's not just explaining the point of view that the audience should share. He's going to talk about it and let you come to your own conclusion, let you have an actual discussion. I don't think these modern properties, when they talk about any of this stuff, do that. Yeah. I don't think there's anything wrong with talking about it, but I think the sin is that the Just Some Guy's villain video applies perfectly to both WandaVision and the Falcon and the Winter Soldier.
Oh, I don't disagree with you. I don't think the writing was up to par, but I think that the story that was being told was certainly a valid story, because after all, Sam Wilson taking over the role of Captain America, looking into that is valid, and they've dealt with that in the comics as well. And I think, look, people are like, well, we don't want our politics in this kind of entertainment, but Captain America, the Winter Soldier is absolutely, it talks about our surveillance state. It is not subtle about the things that it's directly addressing. And I don't have a problem with, if you were making a 70s conspiracy thriller like The Parallax View or 3 Days of the Condor or whatever, it's pretty overt in terms of what the forces that it's dealing with. And now the idea of corporations or big pharma or whatever, I don't think these are subject matters that should be off limits, but it is about the writing. And I will agree. I think there were times when Falcon and the Winter Soldier was just too didactic. It was saying, this is the way it should be. I'm like, dudes, great writing doesn't necessarily mean you have to explain exactly how
it's
we
literally the opposite. It's show, don't tell. It's literally the opposite.
Yeah. And we should be able to infer these kinds of things. And I'll tell you something.
Yeah.
Sam Wilson. Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think that's the difference. I think that's the difference is that I think Sam Wilson, it doesn't matter. The fact that he's black is just one of the many reasons why he might question his ability to accept the mantle of Captain America. There's a lot of reasons he can't live up to, he sees Steve Rogers as a hero out of time. Here's a man that fought in World War II. How can Sam Wilson be that guy? He's never going to fight in World War II, the greatest generation. So
Sam a veteran though?
Yeah, he is a veteran. Yeah.
So because here's my thing: if he wanted to reject it based upon being his own man, I would have been. I've been positive on that.
I agree.
But just him, that's the biggest criticism. What about Sam Wilson, the individual? What about Falcon? Why does he have to lose himself to take on someone else's mantle? What about his own mantle and his own individualism?
I totally agree with you.
The criticism I personally had.
Hey,
I'd
Walter,
much rather. If he was
Robert,
going to reject that, I'd rather him reject it at the end and saying, you know what, I'm going to be Falcon instead.
I wanted to back up my point about The Wire real quick. The 12th and final episode of the 3rd season is called Mission Accomplished.
Right.
Oh.
Remember that, big banner, Bush is standing on the aircraft.
Of course.
So it's like, I'm pretty sure there is something to that. It's like the show MASH is about Korea, but it's really about Vietnam. It's like, but the audience, no one wants to be told that. If like you had like a character saying murder is bad, you'd be like, are you fucking crazy? Do you really expect me to enjoy that? But it's like when you show like the pain of something that like people go through with a murder, or how it impacts people and the repercussions, it's like then you dwell on it and you come to that conclusion as a person, and you value human life. But if you just explain your morality, or you explain your point of view point blank, no interpretation, no dual meaning, it's insulting, and it's very difficult to sit through. And I think the issue is more like in past times, we would have just overlooked something like that, something that blunt. But the thing is, it's everything, it's everywhere. And it's not just in your Marvel, it's on Twitter, it's in the news, it's everywhere you look. It's like you're just being overwhelmed with this one world view. And I think people are just sick of it. I
agree with you. And I think the real key comes down to great writing.
Yeah, I agree.
These stories are the problem. Here's what I don't like. These stories are not giving the audience enough credit for being smart. And because in their point of view, if you don't already agree, you're not smart. I agree with that. I think that's problematic. And again, when I hear people like Alex Kurtzman say that they're using Star Trek as a platform to push their own political agenda, I'm like, you know what? What makes you think that your political agenda is correct? And what I can't stand is that all of these people that are coming out with righteous indignation, I believe that there are certain human truths. Like one of them is we should treat all people kindly. As human beings, it is better to treat your fellow human being with kindness and understanding than it is to not. Because ultimately, we're all living in a society that we want to continue to move forward. I think this is a basic human truth that has been proved time and time again. And now we were on a pretty good evolutionary path. Human beings were, especially in this country. Things were getting better. Agreed. On every level. Could they have gotten better sooner? Sure. Could they? But we were on a track where things were genuinely getting better. We were very aware. Like if you ask anybody, for instance, I have gay friends that will tell you 25 years ago, they would have said there is no way that we would ever have gay marriage in this country. No way. Now I talk to my friends, one friend in particular who I've known since I was 2 years old, who's married to his husband. He's like, I can't believe it. I can't believe that how much social change occurred in 20 years. And
Patrice O'Neill, do you remember Chris Rock in the 90s saying there's never going to be a black president?
Yeah, and tell me about it.
Yeah, and the comedian Patrice O'Neill, I remember listening to these old episodes of Opie and Anthony where it was like before the Obama election. He still didn't believe it was going to happen, even with all the hype. He's like, nope. White people are never going to vote for a black president. Like that was like his point of view. Yeah, twice.
And this social evolution was happening. Why was it happening? Because it's ultimately the way things are supposed to be.
Right.
And eventually that we will come to realize as more and more people are traveling around the world, our communications technology means we can speak to people all over the world. We're now exposed to many different ideas, many different things that we didn't normally have to consider. And now we're going through, it seems like over the last 5 or 6, and I'm not necessarily going to blame the Trump presidency on this, but things have changed. A lot of it's happening in academia, in the colleges, and it's hugely problematic. And what's amazing is I love seeing white academics writing books about white racism and telling white people how racist they are.
It's the grift.
It's a complete grift. And I wasn't really aware. Like, there's a economist, this guy, black guy named Thomas Sowell. He's in his 90s.
Yes,
now.
I love Thomas Sowell.
I've become a huge fan of Thomas Sowell, and I've read a lot of his books now, and I've listened to a lot of his lectures on YouTube. And people come at me and they're like, "Rob, you're supposed to be a classical liberal. How can you like Thomas Sowell?" I'm like, "Have you ever listened to the man?"
Genius.
Like the man, I'm like, how do you, and whether you agree, I don't have to agree with everything Thomas Sowell was saying, but the man has spent his life thinking about these issues, and as a black man and researching them. And I'm like, how do you not, just because you might reject something he says, what I don't understand is, like, a lot of people in our culture that are being rejected by a lot of people that I would think would be on my side of the fence or whatever, they have always surprised me because they're not listening to what people are saying. They're taking quotes out of context, and they're judging people based on things. And I'm like another guy that I'm fascinated by is Jordan Peterson. Because Jordan Peterson is somebody that
fucking base ass Robert Meyer Burnett.
I mean, I'm like, and I started finding like I grew up with trans friends. I had a lot of LGBTQ friends, and never occurred to me that they're anything other than my friends, because we're friends because of shared interests. So it didn't. When the trans controversy erupted around Jordan Peterson, it was really interesting to me because Jordan Peterson was actually not talking about trans rights or trans people at all. He was talking about compelled speech, and how he was pointing out the dangers of the fact that if you're going to compel people to use certain words, this is bad in a free society. Mm-hmm. Now, he was also saying at the same time, that doesn't mean that if I meet somebody who identifies as trans, that I am not going to talk, that I won't use their preferred pronouns. He flat out says it. I will be respectful. However they identify, that's how I will address that person.
Right.
But so
I don't want to be forced to do it by the government that I pay taxes to.
And his issue, like what I found fascinating about this, and I didn't have a dog in this hunt. I didn't know who Jordan Peterson was. I hadn't read anything about his books. But I saw this, and I would watch these videos where he would be attacked by activists. And I'm like, wait a minute, you people are saying the two different things. On one hand, I really do believe that trans people need representation. They need to be recognized, because I believe it is a naturally occurring thing that people, whether they're exposed to more estrogen or testosterone in the womb, eventually we will have scientific studies that show that this is an actual demonstrable state of being.
We will if it proves it. If it proves it's not, we will absolutely not have that study.
Sure, of course. But I believe, having just from my own personal experience moving through life and knowing people, I believe that eventually it will be. And it will. I do. I believe that. And I believe people that LGBTQ people are absolutely, for the most part, born that way. And that is based on my own personal experience, knowing many people throughout my life. So I believe that. Maybe it's not true, but I believe that one day will be proved correct. So I'm all about representation in terms of people. What we want is people's voices heard. Mm-hmm. Like, I also believe Black Americans, especially in this country, have never achieved any kind of equality. They have had to deal with discrimination, institutional, social, personal, their whole lives. There has never been a time when there has not been racism against Black Americans in this country, ever.
I mean, we're wrapping up the show. We're bringing up like the most complex topics.
I know, but I just want to say
I almost semi like.
But But here's what I
you know what I would add to that? I would say that the new addition to that oppression is now called critical race theory, and it's done in the name of quote unquote helping people. I think a lot of the oppression now is this mental oppression that, well, because you're black, you just can't achieve as much. It's like, I'm not gonna do that.
I agree with you 100%, and that's something that's been like this is insane. This kind of shit is absolutely crazy, and it is in fact, like you just said, it's racist.
Yeah,
I mean, the fact is, like I've always said on my show, each human being on this planet, there's only one of us in the cosmic infinitude of the universe. There is only, okay, some people might have twins, I get it, but every single human being is unique. There's never been another one of you in the entire history of mankind on this planet, which means that our baseline, and I believe this, should be that every single person has limitless value. They're more precious than water. They're more precious than the carbon that makes us all up. Every single human being, every sentient being, and I would even go so far as to say animals are kind of this
even
way.
Dildos, even sentient dildos.
Yes, we have a sentient dildo.
But what we need to do as there is one race on this planet, that would be the human race. And until we see ourselves that way and we value ourselves that way, and not only that, we value others in the same way, we have a problem. And we have a problem now where we need to respect one another. And to bring it back home,
we do, but that extends in different directions. It's not purely, like the way it's also like, respect that someone has a different opinion, respect that someone lives a different way, has a different set of values, that we don't need, in no direction do we need to conform to some sort of autocracy where we all have the exact same point of view, worldview. We all think the same. And look, that's going to always create challenges and going to create friction. Though. And that's, I just think life is gray, man. And I think it's important for you just to embrace the gray and understand that it's never going to be perfect. Life's a struggle. We're never going to achieve utopia, and just do your best.
I agree 100%. And, our Western world is designed to celebrate the individual.
Yes.
And the individual is what our civilization is based on. The inalienable rights of not the tribe, not the group that you identify with. The group that you identify with does not supersede you as an individual.
Agreed.
And this is something that I think is incredibly important. Like my entire channel, it's based on the idea that every single person has a story to tell that you haven't heard. And all you have to do is listen. I say that every show. And what we are doing is we are moving away from the importance of the individual and putting the importance on a tribe. And the problem with the tribe is like a corporation. The tribe only exists to serve itself, and the tribe must continue on, and that isn't true. A tribe, you've got to have each individual is what makes up the strength of whatever group you're in, and unless you celebrate the individual differences with people, your tribe is not going to be what you think it's going to be.
Agreed.
And we're moving away from that, and like you said, life is gray, and it's hard, and it's a struggle, and not everybody gets to be what they want to be. People are not like, I think the human animal, we should all be given the same ability to try and fail and do but we're not all equal. Everybody's born with different gifts, different strengths. Like I've always said, I'd love to have been, I played basketball when I was in junior high and high school. I would have loved to have been like someone like LeBron James, but you know what? I wasn't good.
Right.
The reason I stopped playing basketball, I just was not as skilled as other members on my team.
Yes.
And it was maybe a bitter pill to swallow.
It sucks, but it gives you character. You figure out your other strengths, or, you just get humble and you respect your place in the world. You respect that person more. Like, it doesn't always have to be, if you're not like the king of everything, then you're shit. Like, it's just not,
and
everyone's a beautiful snowflake, right?
I'm like, yeah, man, we got to find out that it's tough when you realize that I want to be this person, but I'm not qualified or good enough or great enough. I can't do it.
C'est la vie, man.
And
that's tough.
That's a good thing.
Yeah.
Then you figure out I'm gonna pivot, or I'm gonna move, or I'm gonna do something different, and I'm gonna start something new and create something that I didn't know about, and I'm not going to blame somebody for my failures. I'm going to get up and do something new, and maybe
even a guy like LeBron James or Kobe or whatever, those guys who are that elite, the level of work ethic that they have. Like
Oh, man.
It's unbelievable. Like I read this book
hours and hours and hours in the gym.
It's staggering. Like I read this book called How Champions Think, and like the guy is like this sports psychologist, Dr. Bob Rotella, and he was explaining like all the different things that LeBron did to get like his 3-point shooting. Like he would have like his team made a video of him making all these threes that he would watch over and over, and he would just like every single day had to sink like 1,000 threes or whatever. It was like the work ethic.
That's one element of playing basketball. That's one thing.
Crazy. And it's like, his public persona aside, the goddamn guy works hard.
He works hard, and look what he's doing now. He's getting into film production.
Is he really?
Yeah, I mean, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was one of the staff writers on the recent Veronica Mars TV series.
Really?
Yes.
I would have never known that had you not said
Me
that.
neither.
Dude, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, go to the Hollywood Reporter and look up Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's columns he's writing about the entertainment business.
Really?
Can you believe? Yes.
Well, he was in Airplane.
By the way, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar he wrote a book about Sherlock Holmes' brother Mycroft.
Really?
Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is a big fucking geek. He is one of us. He's
big.
He's an imagination connoisseur. And so what does he do? He becomes one of the greatest basketball. He's one of the greatest ball players on the court who ever lived. Legend. He does some acting. I mean, he acted opposite Bruce Lee. He's in Airplane, and now he's writing episodes of Veronica Mars.
That is interesting. Veronica Mars.
That's a hell of a life to lead.
That is.
Real quick, Steven Seagal says, "Say infected mushroom." R&B knows. What is infected mushroom?
What is infected mushroom?
Infected mushroom is an Israeli electronic or techno band.
Oh,
and they are awesome.
Oh, okay.
They're awesome. I'm a huge infected mushroom fan, and it's. I'll tell a story another time about that. But how cool is it that you look at a guy like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar? He has one career. And what does he do? He doesn't like sit at home and star in TV commercials for Geico now. No, he's completely reinvented himself. He's a novelist. He's a television writer. He's a Hollywood Reporter columnist. He's an activist. He has a whole different life. Like you guys, you didn't even know that about him.
No. News to me.
And I'm like, this is why life is great. And people can do anything if they want.
That's true.
We just have to, what we need is to be able to provide a society where people believe they can do that.
Yeah,
and that's what we want.
Nurture that kind of mentality, that sort of individualism. Yeah,
that's right. That's exactly right.
You want to end on that, Vig?
Yeah, I don't think we can end on anything more positive than that, man. Yeah. Thank you for showing up, and this has been an incredible 2 hours, man. I feel like we could do another 100 hours. If
this was great. I mean, I feel this is the kind of worthwhile. Like we don't have to all agree about everything, but this is the kind of worthwhile discussion that this is what YouTube is made for.
Here. Yeah. And it's good to have you in this community, dude. Like, it's interesting to have like a different perspective because we always talk about we don't want to live in an echo chamber. We don't want to go from one echo chamber to another. Like, we don't want to have to, like, the SJWs, like, they drain us all. And then it's like, well, then we just go somewhere else and just agree, you know what I mean, aggressively. It's like, I value, contrasting ideas and different thoughts and like having a real conversation. So it's like, thank you for coming on here and doing that with us. It was really fun.
You know what? And I want to thank you both because I thought this was very worthwhile. I had a really good time. And this is, I love having these conversations because this is why we communicate.
Right on. Yeah, man.
Yeah.
Well, come back anytime, dude.
Please, anytime.
You know what? I'd love this. I would love this. Can you believe that? Like somebody, Robert says, only 2 hours. It feels like 20 minutes. It felt like 20 minutes
what
to
it
me.
Feels like.
Yeah.
When I stream with Heel versus Babyface and we're talking about action figures, like 2.5 hours go by. I'm like, wait, what? What? I guess that's what they call the flow when you have when you're in the flow, man.
In the zone, like from that movie Soul, where you're just like in the zone. Did you see that? The movie?
Yes, I did see that.
Oh, it was good. I liked it.
It was good. I liked it.
Yeah.
It's so funny. Manowar 665 says true, but you're still wrong about 1/12 scale figures. Hey, listen, man. I just want to say that I do have 1/12 scale figures. This is a 1/12 scale Moon Knight. I do have a few. Right on. It's just not my. It's not my preferred. It's not my preferred scale of choice.
Right on.
It's not like I don't have any.
Awesome. Well, hey, thank you again for coming. Thank you all. This has been one of the more popular shows in the channel's history with many people in the chat. I think what did we get? The top of like 30 or almost 40 people. Thank you all for being here. Please watch the playback. This entire show is worth watching. We talked about a lot of different things that are going on in Hollywood. We talked a little bit about what Robert's doing now with Dota, and it was a great chat. And like I said, we could do another couple hours, but it's been 2 hours. That's we try to keep our show at 2 hours, keep it neat and tight.
By the way, somebody does ask if this is Vampirella in the back. It is. This is Vampirella.
Nice. I thought it was.
Nice.
Yeah. Right on. Some people are like, hey, that's really offensive that you have that Vampirella character on your. I'm like,
good,
you know what?
Good. I'm glad you're offended.
Okay, it's a 50-year-old character. I'm sorry. I used to read Vampirella when I was a kid. This is a 50th anniversary figure. I'm sorry. I don't know why you're offended. There's
no reason.
I mean,
they're not. It's another opportunity to sound off. That's all it is.
Classic Vigilante said he just got his first 1/6 scale.
Okay, can I just say this is a pet peeve of mine? I got my first one. The question that I would ask is, which figure did you get?
Oh man, yeah. So which figure? Classic
which figure?
Did he get Rorschach? I mean, he's got Rorschach as.
I don't know. He has the Rorschach.
They haven't made a really good 6-scale Rorschach, and I've got a third-party figure on order. I can't wait.
Oh, that's cool. Right on.
Cool.
Yeah,
I love that.
All right, even Freddie Mercury is checking out Vampirella.
Yes, he's singing to her. That's James Dean, John Lennon, Charlie Chaplin, Jimi Hendrix, and my 6-scale band is made up so far of that's John Lennon, Freddie Mercury, and then Jimi Hendrix. I'm always looking to expand the band.
Is that Bond sitting down?
That's actually Michael Corleone from Godfather 2.
Oh, nice.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's rad.
And Classic Vigilante got the White Wolf from The Witcher.
Oh, that figure is great too.
He would love a Rorschach though.
Nicely done. Yeah, I've got 6-scale figures of the Comedian and Silk Spectre, but that's the only ones that Hot Toys made.
Oh, okay.
So.
Oh man.
Right on. Yeah. All right.
Well,
thanks,
gentlemen.
This was a hoot.
I guess we'll play the intro / outro and get out of here. Thank you all for showing up. If you just showed up, I see a lot of people just showed up. Please watch the replay. If you like the video, please like the video. If you're so obliged to share and subscribe, which some of you have done, and please also sub to my main man Foulball Productions. It should be in the description. If not, it should come across one of the bots. But yeah, if this show will be on his channel,
of course.
Again,
also sub to R&B. So
obviously sub to R&B. Yeah. Hopefully you already are. I don't know what you're doing if you're not, but sub to R&B.
Go to the Burnett work on YouTube and subscribe and do all that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anything else you want to plug? I know you got the movie Tango.
Tango Shalom is playing at festivals. I don't know the next festival it's going to, but it'll be in a neighborhood near you. I mean, if you ever wanted to see a Jewish indie spiritual quest family dance comedy fable, well then Tango Shalom is the movie for you. But then there's also Dota Dragon's Blood, which is, if you like fantasy anime series, it's 8 episodes. The first episode, to be honest, starts a little conventionally, but it really takes off. And I think by the time you get to the end of the 8 episodes, you'll be breathlessly anticipating season 2, which I can't tell you when it's going to start because we don't know. But they did green light a season 2, and season 2 is way more epic than season 1.
Cool.
So that's
right on.
It. That's it.
I'll check it out. You know what? I wasn't going to, but I will now that we've had you on, and I'll give it a shot. Plus, they do same animation house that does Castlevania, right? It looks a lot like Castlevania.
Yeah, it's got a lot of. I think the studio Mirror does it. So yeah,
okay. Yeah, it looks great.
Yeah.
So.
And Darius says he was sub to R&B before he was sub to us, which I expect.
Yeah,
a lot of you probably was.
I hope so. I was.
Yes, I was definitely sub to R&B before I had a channel.
Yeah.
So, all right,
Robert does ask if I'm working on season 2 of Dota.
Oh,
yes, the answer is yes.
Right on.
Okay.
Right on.
Yes, we have season 2, so that's dope. So is Nerd Portal. So we get it. Everyone was sub to R&B before we existed. We know that. He's better than us. You should be.
No, that's not true. That's not true. We're just different.
Just different. Okay, yeah, I like that. That's a good spin. We're just
nice.
different. We're just different. I like that. It's more comforting.
Yeah. Makes me feel okay.
I mean, if you guys started later, of course, people would be. I was here first. Then but then you know what? I was subscribed to Midnight's Edge and Nerdrotic and Doomcock before I started in this business. on YouTube, you know, and just some guy. I was watching all these people and the Critical Drinker, you know, and all my favorite YouTubers.
Yeah. You know, we meant to actually, we have to have you back because there's like so much stuff. We left because the conversation just flowed so fastly and so quickly. Where that 2 hour went like 20 minutes.
Yeah,
we have to have you back.
We didn't even get into like your YouTube career, which I had a lot of questions about.
And that's so weird because I've been on YouTube for like 6 years now, which is nuts.
That's wild, man. That's awesome.
I mean, I started, you know, on Collider. John Schnepp had me come in, and for 3.5 years, I would just show up, sit down, we'd do the show, and I would leave. Like I had no. And it was Schnepp who would say, "You should do your own YouTube show." I'm like, "Well, I don't know. What would I talk about?" And now, of course, 3 years later, here we are.
Yeah, man. Here we are. This is dope. Yeah. So, all right. Thank you for hanging out with us, everybody. This was awesome. You guys are a wonderful community. We value each and every one of you. Save Sentient Dildo, but everyone else is great. Thanks for hanging out. We'll see you on my channel next week.
All right. Peace.
Peace. This is Culture Crime Fighters. We are a Culture Crimes Task Force so powerful, so far-reaching, not even the most dastardly of villains can escape. Our goal is to identify and defeat all culture criminals wherever they lurk and destroy them. For too long have these cretins carried out their nefarious deeds, and we will sit for it no longer. Beware, you may commit your culture crimes, but if you do, justice will be served at the hands of the Culture Crime Fighters.
What are you?
I'm Vigilante Williamson.
You went full.
SJW.
Never go full.
SJW.
You don't buy that? Yeah.
President of Lucasfilm, Kathleen Kennedy.
You guys are nuts. That's one of my pet peeves, and here you come along with a third pronunciation. Like, what are you doing? Actually, it's pronounced
stupid bitch.
If you could just be like 25% less brave, that would be great. People were like, there's no way he fucked her. This pig, he didn't fuck this pig.
I think he probably did. I think he didn't give a fuck. Allegedly.
That's just your opinion. It's in England, they say
audible cunt.
And in America, we say Amber Heard. And that's where the confusion is.
See, I was going with the British way.
Turns out it's a little more nuanced than that.
And I mean, hey, we're in 2021. Any moderately attractive girl can do squats for a few months and put a camera up her ass and become a, and go viral. So
I don't know. I mean, I'll keep my mind open. I spent all day yesterday on that video. I edited, I cut, I put sound effects and visuals. I'm tap dancing, I'm spinning plates. Although for the life of me, I can't grow it. It's got like 45 fucking views.
You know what I think it is now? Tease the algorithmic guys. Brightest Day is in the chat. His channel's growing because of those shorts. Yeah, that's how it goes.
That's how it is.
Man, this has been a fun ride. I thank everybody for being here the whole time. I mean, there's regulars, obviously, Snorter Poopist, the Islington Girl, Man of War 665, Neighbor of the Beast, Just Another Red Shirt. Not just another red shirt. He's the red shirt, the crew. I love you all, man.
You guys are the shit. Love you all. Man of War 665, Lord Thoth, Just Another Red Shirt, Darius Munchausen, 24/7 Fusion Media, Ascension Dildo, Mark D with a C, Snorter Poopus, Android Scanner, the Islington Girl, New Bomb Turk. Everybody, you guys are great. We'll see you all next time. Have a great night.
Peace.
Yeah, peace. I love